Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lauren Stewart. Lauren Stewart was born on January 9, 1973. She has spent most of her life in Michigan. Lauren pursued her passions as a model and actress, attending workshops and interacting with photographers to further her career. Those who know her describe her as charming and easygoing. Lauren is passionate about her acting and modeling work. She enjoys new experiences, learning from others and sharing ideas, seeing life as an adventure and striving to live life to the fullest. Lauren is married to Daniel Stewart, a senior software architect at the University of Michigan, where he works predicting heart attacks. Prior to his current role, Daniel spent several years in the tech industry as a Coda developer. Lauren and Daniel were devout Christians in the Jehovah's Witnesses sect for a long time until 2013, when they decided to leave Christianity. Lauren and Daniel have 2 children, Stephen Stewart, 27, a data solutions architect and computer scientist, and Bethany Stewart, 24, a talented artist and graphic designer. At 45, Lauren seems to have the perfect life, a loving husband, well-educated children, a thriving modeling career, and a beautiful home in Keio Harbor. But deep inside, Lauren struggled with the emotional pain of being shunned and rejected by the Jehovah's Witness community she grew up in. The strict rules and practices of shunning former members took their toll on her. Lauren and Daniel's decision to leave the faith was a difficult one. The Laurens remained devout Jehovah's Witnesses until 2013, but the church's strict rules posed problems for their children's futures. Celebrating holidays was forbidden and higher education was prohibited, with the threat of expulsion for non-compliance. When Daniel asked for his children to attend university, he was warned that defying church policy would result in expulsion, which was distressing for the family as it meant complete social isolation, even from relatives. Lauren's family made the decision to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses after careful consideration. While the decision initially seemed right, they soon faced strong opposition from their community, which became unbearable, especially for Lauren. She found that even simple tasks like going shopping became difficult due to hostile looks and hurtful comments from former friends. Although these comments were not directed at her, they were said loudly enough for her to hear. Living in a small community of 3,300 residents, many of whom were Jehovah's Witnesses, Lauren's family faced a harsh reality, with prominent church members constantly reminding Lauren of her outcast status. The emotional stress eventually became too much to bear. Lauren turned to exercise to regain her health. She worked out regularly and made it her routine, which led to a dramatic change. Lauren became a fitness trainer and found success as a model. Despite being rejected by the church, Lauren appeared optimistic and confident to those around her. However, behind her pleasant exterior, Lauren was secretly struggling with chronic depression. She had been battling this condition for some time, and it had gotten worse since being ostracized by the church. As a result, Lauren often hid her true feelings behind a fake smile. Lauren's family was drowning in debt, on the brink of bankruptcy. Overwhelmed by the pressure of her own financial difficulties and emotional pain, Lauren devised a plan to solve all her problems at once. She began researching ways to end her life and videos on how to use a pistol. On February 15, 2018, Lauren left a heartbreaking note on the dining room table, meticulously cleaned the house, and sent messages to loved ones and Daniel's boss. And finally, Lauren flipped through all the family photos on her desk. Lauren texted her husband's boss at 9:24 a.m. saying that her husband Daniel had died in an accident and that she would provide more information later. However, she did not respond to her boss's subsequent messages. At 5:07 p.m. that same day, Lauren texted her cousin, saying that she was taking her family with her so they wouldn't have to suffer. She said that they would sleep until Christ was resurrected and hoped that her cousin would do better than her. Her cousin was frightened by the message and told Lauren not to harm herself or her family. Lauren had been suffering from mental health issues in recent months that her family had not known about. She had a gun and made the tragic decision to use it to kill her loved ones. Lauren's first victim was her husband, Daniel, 47, who was shot in the head while trying to escape from the basement where he was relaxing. Lauren used a pillow as a silencer to muffle the sound of the gunshot. After Daniel was shot, Lauren went upstairs to her daughter Bethany's sleeping room. Lauren shot her at point-blank range, instantly killing Bethany. Next, her son Stephen, who had his own house on the other side of town, Lauren tricked Stephen into coming to her house. When Stephen was busy with the task his mother had assigned him, his back turned, Lauren shot him at close range. The horror did not stop there. Lauren killed the family dog, placing its body in the bathtub. A neighbor heard these gunshots but thought someone was slamming the door. When the house became a cold morgue, Lauren meticulously cleaned it. Then Lauren used the gun to kill herself. Lauren's cousin, who had been trying to contact her, became concerned when she did not respond to their messages. The cousin decided to visit Lauren's home the following morning, February 16th, with a friend. When no one answered the door, they contacted the police. Upon arriving at the house, the police found the kitchen to be tidy and well organized, with a stocked refrigerator and handwritten labels on various items. A calendar was also hanging on the refrigerator. However, police discovered the family dog dead in the bathtub. This made police more cautious, initially fearing the possibility of an active shooter. As they continued to search the house, they found Stephen Stewart on the floor, shot while sitting on a chair in another room. In a bedroom, the police discovered Bethany's lifeless body, shot while she was asleep. A pillow had been used to muffle the sound of the gunshot, and the pillowcase showed signs of the shooting. The police also found Daniel Stewart's body on the basement floor in front of a couch, with his right hand still in his jeans pocket. Elsewhere in the house, Lauren was found at the foot of the stairs, with a pistol next to her and a gunshot wound between her eyes. 2 notes were discovered on the dining room table, one addressed to the medical examiner, the other a suicide note revealing Lauren's inner struggles. Lauren's note explained that she felt she had allowed evil into her heart by rejecting God's love. She believed that by killing her family, she could spare them from suffering. Through interviews with relatives, friends, and neighbors, it became clear that the couple had become reclusive after leaving the Jehovah's Witness church. Lauren's past struggles, particularly her battle with depression, were compounded by the stress of motherhood. Family members also revealed that Lauren, who was one of 11 siblings, had a history of depression that likely contributed to her actions. Lauren has become increasingly obsessed with her faith in recent years. Her family, including her father and sister, have not spoken to her in years. Lauren's mother died when she was 13. The tragic event has left a lasting impact on those close to the family. Joyce Taylor, a longtime friend, believes the murders were a direct result of the family's rejection by the Jehovah's Witnesses. Joyce Taylor and other former members reveal the harsh reality of leaving the faith. When someone leaves the Jehovah's Witnesses, they are often shunned by their own family members who remain in the church. This severe form of shunning can take a heavy emotional toll. According to Joyce Taylor, Lauren and Daniel's desire to give their children a college education conflicted with the church's teachings, which discourage such pursuits. This clash between their aspirations and the church's rigid doctrines ultimately led to a tragic outcome. The family was shunned in every way possible. As Joyce Taylor explained, when you're raised a Jehovah's Witness, the church controls many aspects of your life, including your friendships and associations. If you go against these rules, you risk being disfellowshipped or shunned. Joyce Taylor stormed into a Kingdom Hall meeting in Union Lake, seizing the opportunity to confront the congregation about a recent tragedy. She passionately criticized the gathering, her voice filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. 5 years ago, you withdrew your support from a small family, Joyce Taylor exclaimed. They had no one else to turn to, but you turned them away and shunned them. Why? Because they wanted to raise their children as they saw fit. Just 2 days ago, 4 people died because of your alienation, Joyce Taylor said. Her words sent shockwaves through the room, forcing her to push away members of her congregation as she expressed her pent-up frustration. Police investigations into Lauren's family revealed that she, her husband, and her sons were all using cannabis. Further investigation revealed that Lauren's horrific actions were the result of a combination of factors. These included feelings of loneliness, strained relationships with family and friends due to their differing religious views. These factors combined to add to her pain, ultimately leading her to commit a horrific act. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Gabriela Alcano. Gabriela Alcano was born on May 17, 2001, in Santiago, the capital city of Chile. She was the only child of Federico Alino and Carolina Donosa Campos, and the first grandchild in a large, close-knit family. Her paternal uncle, Rodrigo, who served as her godfather, and her grandfather, Carlos, both adored her deeply, with Carlos regarding her as the central figure in his life. Gabriela grew up in a loving and supportive environment, despite her family's modest means. Her parents, though not wealthy, worked hard to provide her with a good education and upbringing. When Gabriela was 5, her parents divorced, and she lived with her mother, who dedicated herself to raising her. Her father, however, remarried and had 2 younger sons, but he continued to support Gabriela and her mother financially and remained involved in her life. Gabriela was a sweet and friendly child, who was a bit shy but made friends easily. Her gentle nature and lovely appearance earned her admiration from those around her. She excelled academically, enjoyed music, dance, and art, and her parents encouraged her talents. Gabriela cherished her relationships with her younger half-brothers, spending quality time with them at her father's nearby home during weekends and holidays. Overall, Gabriela's childhood was a happy and carefree time, filled with love and support from her family. Gabriela's first love was at the age of 15. She fell for Fabian Chasis Aravan, a fellow student who was a year older. At first, their relationship was innocent and sweet. They would walk together, share ice cream, and steal kisses. Fabian came from a good family with well-respected parents who valued education and raised him to be a good person. However, Fabian was a quiet and private person who struggled with social interactions. He would avoid eye contact and turn away from others, leading many to think he was just shy. Gabriela's father met Fabian and thought he was a calm, dependable, and responsible young man. He had a serious talk with Fabian, asking him to take care of Gabriela, and Fabian promised to do so. Initially, Fabian made an effort to be attentive and caring. However, as time passed, a different side of Fabian emerged. He became controlling and cruel, revealing a darker aspect of his personality. Fabian's controlling behavior dominated the relationship. He was intensely jealous and dictated who Gabriela could and couldn't interact with. He monitored her phone activity, insisting on instant responses to his calls and messages, regardless of the time. If she failed to comply, he would throw tantrums, displaying childish and abusive behavior. During the first 6 months of their relationship, Gabriela attempted to downplay Fabian's frequent outbursts of anger and jealousy, believing they would eventually subside. Blinded by her love for him, she tried to meet all his demands and held on to the hope that he would revert to the caring and gentle person she initially fell in love with. Fabian's behavior became increasingly irritable, volatile, and aggressive. He emotionally drained Gabriela, progressing from verbal abuse to physical mistreatment. He would slap her, pull her hair, or grab her hands, often leaving no visible marks. However, bruises would occasionally appear on her wrists and shoulders, evidence of Fabian's rough handling. Gabriella tried to hide her situation, but her loved ones noticed her depressed state and frequent tears. She was no longer her usual cheerful and outgoing self, instead withdrawing from friends and avoiding contact with people Fabian had forbidden her from seeing. Gabriella repeatedly tried to end her relationship with Fabian, but he would not let her go. Despite her efforts to break free, he would pressure her into getting back together. This cycle of breaking up and reuniting continued for over a year, marked by Fabian's stalking, threats, and harassment. In 2017, Fabian got into trouble for physically attacking a classmate outside of school. Although the details of the incident were unclear, he was accused of mistreatment and assault, which could have led to jail time. However, the case was settled out of court, and Fabian was expelled from school. He was forced to complete his education through homeschooling. When Gabriella finally decided to end the relationship for good, Fabian became angry and desperate. He apologized and promised to change, begging her to take him back. However, when she refused, he began to stalk and harass her. He would show up at her school or home, even attempting to climb into her room through the window. He bombarded her with dozens of calls, texts, voice messages, and social media messages, trying to intimidate her into resuming their relationship. Gabriella was determined to end the relationship, despite Fabian's erratic behavior. His messages veered wildly from apologetic to threatening, but she remained resolute. However, Fabian's actions were unpredictable and frightening. He would often vanish for weeks, giving Gabriella a glimmer of hope that he had moved on, only to reappear and resume his harassment. Fabian's behavior was relentless and intrusive. He would follow Gabriella everywhere, showing up unexpectedly and causing public scenes. His outbursts were loud and intimidating, leaving Gabriella feeling anxious and fearful. As a result, she became reluctant to be alone, always seeking the company of friends or family after school. She would often meet her mother at work and travel home with her, or ask her father or uncle to accompany her on trips. This constant vigilance took a toll on Gabriella, leaving her exhausted and drained over several months. A devastating series of events began to unfold for the Alcano family when a burglar broke into the home of Federico's second wife, taking her life in a tragic turn of events. At the time, the children were at school and Federico was at work, leaving her alone and vulnerable. Fortunately, the perpetrator, a neighbor with a prior conviction, was apprehended immediately. Gabriella and her mother rallied around Federico, offering emotional support and helping him care for the children during this difficult time. Although Gabriella's thoughts were temporarily diverted from Fabian, who had gone missing around the same time, she remained focused on her own goals. She was busy preparing for entrance exams, hoping to secure a spot at one of Santiago's most prestigious universities, where she aspired to study journalism or advertising. However, this tragedy was only the beginning of a series of heartbreaking events that would soon befall the Alcano family. In May 2018, Fabian suddenly re-emerged, beginning a campaign of obsessive stalking that made Gabriella feel unsafe in all aspects of her life. He was able to access her property by climbing over the fence and even showed up at places she regularly visited, such as the supermarket and the mall. By early June, Gabriella was so alarmed by his behavior that she sent screenshots of her disturbing messages with Fabian to her two closest friends, including audio recordings where he explicitly threatened her and demanded they restart their relationship. Gabriella was secretly living in fear for her own safety and that of her loved ones, but she chose not to share her concerns with her family to avoid causing them unnecessary worry. On June 10, 2018, the Alino family came together to celebrate a milestone birthday, Carlos's 80th. Tragically, this joyful gathering would turn out to be the last day of life for Gabriella and her mother, Carolina. The evening had begun on a happy note, with the house filled with laughter, music, and the warmth of a big family meal. As they celebrated Carlos's special day, everyone wished him good health and many more years to come. Gabriela played with her younger brothers and her uncle Rodrigo's children, but despite the festive atmosphere, she seemed somewhat preoccupied and distant. Her uncle noticed her unease and decided to approach her, asking if everything was okay and if something was troubling her. Gabriela gave a sad smile and shrugged, but didn't explain why she was nervous. Her uncle chose not to pry, thinking she would open up when she was ready. However, he later regretted not pressing her for more information. After the party, Federico drove his ex-wife and daughter home. He kissed Gabriela on the forehead, told her he loved her, and reassured her that she could always count on him for support. He then returned home with his younger children. Tragically, this was the last time he saw his eldest daughter and first wife alive. In the early hours of June 11th, a horrific crime took place. Fabian, armed with a hunting knife, climbed over the fence of his ex-girlfriend's house. He planned to sneak into Gabriela's bedroom through the window and attack her. However, just as he was about to enter, the lights turned on, and the back door creaked open. Carolina, who had been unable to sleep, had gotten up to investigate the noise. Fabian pounced on her, pushing her back inside, and began stabbing her repeatedly. Fabian brutally stabbed his Carolina 36 times, with most of the wounds inflicted on her chest, neck, and head. This attack was fatal and left her with no chance of survival. Carolina only managed to scream a couple of times before falling silent. The noise from the attack woke up Gabriela, who rushed downstairs to see what was happening. As she went down, she saw Fabian, covered in blood and clearly enraged. He caught hold of her and dragged her down. Gabriela was desperately trying to call the emergency services with her phone, but she couldn't make the call. In a horrific act, Fabian attacked Carolina and stabbed her once in the chest, piercing her heart and instantly killing her. He then moved her body to the kitchen. After the murder, Fabian tried to cover his tracks by wiping away his fingerprints and cleaning the bloody footprints. He also washed himself and the knife in the bathroom. After cleaning up, Fabian left the house quietly around 5:30 a.m. without being noticed by the neighbors. Following the event, Federico appeared unaffected. However, concerns grew when Carolina, typically a reliable and communicative colleague, missed work for 2 consecutive days without answering her phone. Her employer contacted Federico, asking him to find out what had happened to Carolina. When questioned, Federico was surprised and claimed to have called Carolina, but she was unreachable, as was Gabriela, whose phone was off. Next, Federico phoned his brother, Rodrigo, but Rodrigo stated that he had neither seen nor heard from the missing individuals since their friend's birthday. Following the phone call, Federico decided to pay a visit to Carolina's home. The property appeared uninhabited. Nonetheless, Carolina's vehicle remained in the garage. Without forcibly entering, despite possessing a spare key, Federico merely checked on the status of the property. Federico called the police and asked them to check the house, but he didn't enter himself because he was afraid of what he might find. The police officers were puzzled by this, especially since he had a key. When they finally entered the house at 11 a.m., they found the lifeless bodies of Carolina and Gabriela on the kitchen floor, surrounded by pools of blood. Despite the obvious fact that the women had been dead for over a day, Federico was overcome with grief and irrationally demanded that the police call an ambulance to save them. The police had to calm Federico down, but his behavior raised suspicions, and they took him outside to a police car for questioning. When he tried to leave the car and found the door locked, he became agitated and demanded to know why. It was then that he realized he was the main suspect in the double homicide. Federico was shocked and devastated by this turn of events, unable to comprehend how he could be suspected of killing his own daughter. Rodrigo arrived shortly after and was equally shocked to learn that his brother had not been released. He was also struggling to come to terms with the investigation revealed that Gabriella's friends reported that she was being stalked by her ex-boyfriend, Fabian. Screenshots of his threatening messages and voice recordings, which included a disturbing phrase, "It's easier to take her life than to let her go," were also obtained. This came as a shock to Federico, Gabriella's father, who recalled that Fabian seemed pleasant when they first met, despite his daughter's failed attempts to break up with him. The contrast between the heinous crime and the normalcy of Fabian's daily life, where he spent time with family and friends and posted light-hearted photos on social media, made his crime all the more inconceivable. After being taken into custody, Fabian responded to allegations with pretended astonishment and anguish, falsely claiming his innocence and feigning affection for Gabriella. Fabian had gotten rid of the object used to commit the murder and thrown away some clothes with blood on them. However, there were still small drops of blood on his shoes, and footprints matching his shoes were found at the scene of the crime. Additionally, 4 of Gabriella's classmates said they heard Fabian threaten her, saying it would be easier to kill her than let her go. Because of the evidence and what the witnesses said, Fabian admitted to the crime, but tried to make himself look like a lover who was deeply hurt. The defendant claimed that his intention was not to harm Gabriella, but rather to have a conversation with her. However, the situation escalated, and he ultimately treated her mother as an unwanted witness. He struggled to provide a reasonable explanation for bringing a hunting knife to the encounter, which was supposedly meant to be a conversation. Following the autopsy and other necessary examinations, the victims' bodies were released to their family for burial. A large crowd gathered at the funeral to pay their respects to the deceased and offer condolences to their loved ones. Gabriella was laid to rest in a white dress she had always wanted to wear but never had the chance to. Coralina was buried in a closed casket due to the severe mutilation of her face. Fabian's family hired a skilled lawyer who developed a strong defense strategy, aiming to secure a minimal sentence for his client. During the initial court hearings, the lawyer highlighted Fabian's young age and clean record, pointing out that the attack on his classmate had been resolved outside of court. However, the victim's family pushed for a more severe charge of femicide, which was rejected by the prosecution due to the specific requirements of Chile's law. Since Fabian and the victim were not in a romantic relationship at the time of the crime, the case did not meet the criteria for femicide. The lawyer also argued that Fabian had acted on impulse and was in a state of distress when he committed the crime. As a result, Fabian faced a potential 15-year sentence for the double homicide and assault charges. The victim's family, understandably, demanded the maximum punishment for Fabian. After the initial hearings, the judge gave both the prosecution and defense 6 months to gather evidence. Fabian's lawyer requested his release pending trial, but the judge denied this request, keeping Fabian in custody. Gabriella's father was furious. He lost 2 loved ones to violent deaths. Now, the person responsible for the murders of his ex-wife and daughter might receive a lenient sentence. The defense lawyer tried to blame the victims, and the authorities seemed willing to accept this excuse. In response, Gabriella's father and uncle, along with women's rights groups, proposed Gabriella's Law. This law would broaden the definition of femicide to include intimate partner violence, regardless of whether they was married or cohabiting. The National Office for Women and Gender Equality soon joined the cause, actively pushing for the law. Although the bill faced opposition due to concerns that it could lead to new charges and stricter penalties for perpetrators already in prison, feminist groups nationwide rallied behind the Alino family. They organized marches and demonstrations in support of Gabriella's Law. In August 2019, a year and 3 months after the tragic murders, significant changes were made to Chile's femicide law. Known as Gabriella's Law, these amendments aimed to strengthen the country's response to violence against women. The law now defines femicide as any act of violence, injury, or murder committed against a woman due to hatred based on her gender, regardless of the relationship between the victim and the perpetrator. Additionally, the law considers it an aggravating circumstance if the victim is a minor or has health issues. In April 2022, Fabian Series went on trial for attacking his ex-girlfriend and her mother 4 years earlier. Thanks to Gabriella's law, the defense had limited options. Fabian was charged with femicide under aggravating circumstances because one of the victims was a minor, as well as with double homicide and assault. On April 20th, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the verdict was delivered, Federico and Rodrigo spoke to the court, expressing their gratitude to the judges for their fair decision. They acknowledged that no punishment could restore the life of their loved ones, Carolina and Gabriella, but emphasized that a life sentence for the perpetrator would serve as a safeguard, protecting other women from suffering a similar tragic fate. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Brittany Gregory. Brittany Gregory was born on April 1, 1988, in Brick Township, the youngest of 5 children in her family. When her parents divorced, she went to live with her father, but remained close to her siblings, particularly her sister Brianna, who was 4 years older. In school, Brittany was an outstanding student, and her teachers believed she had the potential to become a scholar. However, her unusual dream was to become a forensic scientist and study crime scene evidence. As the baby of the family, Brittany relished the extra attention she received. Her mother acknowledged that she was spoiled, but not vain or arrogant. For her 16th birthday in April, she held her mother to a promise to let her get her belly button pierced. Brittany was a big fan of pop star Britney Spears and had posters of her in her bedroom. She enjoyed watching cartoons, especially SpongeBob SquarePants. Her fascination with forensic science led her to watch TV shows about the subject, a profession she wanted to pursue. Brittany and her mother would often watch the same shows together and then call each other to discuss them. In 2004, Brittany, 16, and her sister, Brianna, 20, lived with their father, Joe Dunn, and his new girlfriend, Lori Peterson, in a small house close to their school. Located at the end of the street, the house was near a wooded area. At that time, Brittany had been dating John Fitzgerald, 18, for almost 2 years. He was a nice guy who had the approval of Brittany's family, and they had a very warm relationship, making them seem like the perfect couple. On Sunday, July 11, 2004, Brittany's mother, Deborah, and her sister Brianna drove to South Toms River, about 15 miles from Brittany's home, to visit her older brother and his wife, who had recently had a baby girl. That evening, around 8:30 p.m., Brittany called her mother on her cell phone, asking for a ride to her boyfriend John's house. Brittany sounded very upset, suggesting there might be trouble. Her mother explained that she was out of town and couldn't drive her, but said that her sister Brianna could arrive in about an hour. Brittany agreed to wait. About 45 minutes after Brittany phoned, Brianna was finally free to call her back, but Brittany didn't pick up. Brianna assumed that Brittany must be sleeping, or that someone had taken her to John's, which is why she wasn't answering. However, when Brianna got back home the next morning, she was surprised to find that Brittany was nowhere to be found, although all of her belongings, including her phone, were still at the house. Brianna suspected that Brittany might have spent the night at her boyfriend's house, but it was unusual that she hadn't mentioned it to anyone and had left her cell phone behind. This wasn't typical of Brittany. Seeking answers, Brianna began calling all of Brittany's friends to see if anyone had information about her whereabouts, but none of them knew anything. After failing to reach her sister, Brianna decided to call John, who told her he last spoke to Brittany on Sunday morning, and they hadn't been in touch since. Lori Peterson, a family friend who lived with the girls, reported that she returned home around 10 p.m. on Sunday night, but Brittany was nowhere to be found. Brianna immediately sensed something was wrong and went to the police station to file a missing persons report. At first, the police were skeptical, thinking Brittany had likely run away or was out with friends. However, Brianna convinced them that she had already contacted all of Brittany's friends and her boyfriend, and none of them knew her whereabouts. Brianna was certain her sister wouldn't run away from home because she was an exemplary student who spent most of her time in the library. Brittany always notified her family before leaving the house, and all her belongings, including her money and phone, were left behind. After Brianna persuaded the police that her sister couldn't have disappeared on her own, they launched an investigation. The officers first searched Brittany's room at home, inspecting her belongings, including her purse with her phone, ID, and makeup. Although they didn't find any suspicious evidence, they still interviewed everyone living in the house and ruled out the possibility that someone close to Brittany was involved in her disappearance. The police launched a thorough search of the area surrounding the house, checking every nearby residence, scouring the property, and interviewing neighbors. Their goal was to find potential witnesses who might have seen or heard anything unusual. As they surveyed the scene, they noted the house's location at the end of the street, as well as the wooded area directly across the street. During their canvassing, none of the neighbors reported anything suspicious, except for one woman who recalled seeing Brittany walking down the street toward her own house late on Friday night, when it was already dark. Although this sighting occurred 2 days before Brittany's disappearance, investigators took note of it, recognizing it as a curious detail that didn't quite fit the image of the modest, bookish girl who rarely ventured out without her parents' permission. This raised questions. What had prompted Brittany to venture out so late, and was she actually allowed to do so? The police were eager to determine whether Brittany was as innocent and homebound as her sister had described her. Numerous police interviews with Brittany's family, neighbors, and teachers revealed that everyone spoke highly of her, with no one having anything bad to say. In her conversation with the police, Brianna mentioned that Brittany and her boyfriend, John, had a strained relationship lately with frequent arguing. On the day of her disappearance, the couple had another fight, leaving Brittany upset and wanting to visit John that evening to make amends. As a result of their investigation, the detectives decided to scrutinize John's alibi more thoroughly. They asked him to come to the police station to determine if he had seen Brittany on the day she vanished. John stated that his last phone conversation with Brittany was on Sunday morning when he was at the beach with friends. At that time, Brittany was upset that he had gone without her, and they had an argument. They hadn't spoken since then. John also revealed that he had ended their relationship a few days prior, but she couldn't accept it, even though she knew he was already dating another girl. John claimed he had no plans to meet Brittany that night and wasn't aware she was coming to his house. The reason for their breakup was a rumor that Brittany had kissed another guy at a party. Although John didn't see it himself, he decided to end the relationship and started dating another girl. John last saw Brittany on July 10th, the day before she disappeared, when she gave him a letter expressing her desire to reconcile. The detectives asked John for permission to review the letter Brittany had written, and he handed it over. In the letter, Brittany apologized for her behavior and for breaking John's heart. She also asked him to remain friends. John seemed genuinely concerned and worried that Brittany hadn't been found yet. The police had no evidence linking John to Brittany's disappearance, and after he passed a lie detector test, he was cleared of suspicion. However, John did tell detectives one important detail. He said that Brittany often came to his house through the woods behind her father's house. The story of Brittany's disappearance grew increasingly complex. Detectives started to speculate whether Brittany had attempted to reach John's house, about a mile from her father's house, by walking through the woods that night. Given the darkness, she could have easily gotten lost or encountered difficulties along the way. The police launched a search in the woods, focusing on the path that began near her house and which she likely took. Walking in the woods at night, was frightening and perilous, raising the question of why a young girl like Brittany wasn't intimidated by the prospect. The forest search continued for 3 days, but yielded no results. Just when the investigation seemed stuck, a woman came forward who had been with her brother in a nearby park on the night Brittany vanished. The park was quiet and deserted, with no cars present, except for a distinctive Chevrolet pickup truck that drove by. The woman noticed the truck, even recalling its license plate. Following a thorough investigation, authorities discovered the truck was registered to 23-year-old Anthony Geiger. To establish a connection between Anthony and Brittany's disappearance, police delved into his past, revealing that he was the former boyfriend of Brittany's sister, Bobby Joe. Bobby Joe explained to detectives that she and Anthony split about a month prior due to his excessive jealousy and obsessive focus on her sister Brittany. She suspected Anthony, 23, harbored feelings for Brittany, which led her to ultimately terminate their relationship. Brittany's friends recalled that Anthony always had a strange way of looking at her and would frequently try to flirt with her. The most recent instance of this behavior was at lunch, where Anthony once again attempted to flirt with Brittany. As a result, detectives began to suspect Anthony of kidnapping Brittany and decided to bring him in for questioning. During the interrogation, Anthony claimed that he was not in the area where Brittany lived on the evening of July 11th. He stated that he didn't arrive until the next day, July 12th, by which time the police had already started searching for the missing girl. Anthony admitted to being on good terms with Brittany and seeing her at social gatherings, but maintained that they were just friends and that he never flirted with her. He also stated that he was aware that Brittany was too young for him and that his feelings towards her were purely platonic. Anthony testified that he spent the evening of July 11th at home with his new girlfriend, who corroborated his alibi. Despite this, investigators remained suspicious of Anthony, partly because his residence was near Brittany's home. Investigators went back to examine the letter Brittany had written to John and noticed disturbing signs that she was saying goodbye to her loved one. They began to fear that Brittany might be hurting herself after breaking off her relationship with her boyfriend. However, Brittany's parents rejected this version, believing that their daughter was smart and determined and would not give up her grand plans because of her breakup with her boyfriend. They believed Brittany was too in love with life. After the investigation stalled once more, the police turned to the media to seek help from the public in finding potential witnesses. To bolster their efforts, officers from other areas joined the investigation. Frustrated with waiting, Brittany's parents took an active role in the search, going door to door in the neighborhood, asking questions, although this approach yielded no results. The police refocused their attention on Brittany's home, where everything began. Even if she had indeed walked through the woods to meet her boyfriend, it was puzzling that she had left her phone behind in her room. Could someone have abducted her from the house itself? If so, was it someone she knew and trusted? During a meticulous search of the house, the police discovered a crucial piece of evidence in Brittany's room: her personal diary, containing a handwritten letter. The contents of this letter proved vital to the investigation, lifting the shroud of secrecy surrounding the family's relationships. Brittany wrote about her life in a letter, describing her relationships with friends and her boyfriend, as well as her schooling. She also shared details about her family, explaining that it was dysfunctional. Every Sunday, she visited her older brother, who was in jail. Her mother was a drug addict who had abandoned her when she was just 9 years old. Now Brittany lived with her father, with whom she was not close, and his girlfriends. Brittany admitted that she wasn't perfect and had done things she wasn't proud of. However, she was determined not to follow in her parents' footsteps and wanted to succeed in life. Her dream was to become a forensic scientist and help solve crimes. After reading the letter, the police widened their search to include Brittany's family, who had not previously been suspected. Detectives began investigating each family member, and discovered that a male massage parlor was operating from Brittany's home. Lori Peterson, a friend of Brittany's father, was offering intimate services to different men every day, masquerading as a massage therapist. Neighbors were aware of this, and Lori herself didn't hide it, distributing business cards in the area. Neighbors reported that Brittany's father's house was a frequent gathering spot for suspicious individuals who would use illegal substances. This led the police to believe that the home environment was dysfunctional. Multiple men, mostly unknown to Lori, would visit her for her services, raising the possibility that one of them might have kidnapped Brittany from the house. Over 100 police officers worked to identify everyone who had visited Joe Dunn's house in the past month, a challenging task. A week after Brittany's disappearance on July 18th, the police announced they had arrested a murder suspect, stunning Brittany's family, who were still searching for her since her body had not been found. When Brittany's mother, Deborah, saw a picture of the suspect on television, she recognized him as her longtime friend, 38-year-old Jack Jr. He had been a close family friend for 20 years, attending all their family gatherings. In fact, his daughter was engaged to Brittany's brother, who was currently in prison. Deborah was stunned, unable to comprehend how Jack could be involved in Brittany's case, given his close relationship with their family and his children's friendship with Brittany. Despite this, they still held out hope that Brittany was alive. However, court records and interviews revealed that Jack was a hardened criminal with a history of threatening his neighbors throughout his adult life. He had been arrested over a dozen times in the last 10 years alone and had served time in state prison for theft and parole violations. His numerous crimes included breaking into cars, houses, and garden sheds, as well as drug use and sales. He had even threatened a man with a baseball bat and fought with police. Many of his offenses went unreported, as people were afraid of him. The last time Jack was sentenced, he received 5.5 years in prison and was released just a year before Brittany's disappearance. Although Brittany's parents suspected that Jack might steal from them to fund his drug habit, they never thought he was capable of harming their daughter. After Jack's arrest, the details of how the police connected him to Brittany's disappearance came to light. It started with a call to the police station. The caller reported that a few days prior he had met Jack, who had confided in him about back pain he was experiencing due to burying a girl's body in sandy soil. Jack boasted that the burial site would never be discovered and asked for advice on how deep to bury the body to avoid attracting animals. The police asked the informant to come to the station and suggested he wear a wire to meet with Jack. Jack questioned him about the crimes, including the murder. The informant agreed, and during the meeting, Jack revealed that he had buried the girl's body in a secluded area, claiming it would never be found. Although he admitted to committing the murder, he refrained from mentioning Brittany's name. In addition, Jack revealed his intention to eliminate someone who possessed too much knowledge, gesturing towards his friend Tommy, who was present in the car but didn't overhear the conversation. This led the detectives to believe that Tommy held crucial information that could crack the case, since Jack wouldn't have wanted to silence him otherwise. The detectives brought Tommy in for questioning at the station, but he refused to cooperate, claiming he knew nothing. However, the detectives were certain he was lying, and to prove their point, they played a recording of Jack stating he wanted to kill Tommy due to his knowledge. Realizing he was in danger, Tommy decided to collaborate with the authorities. According to Tommy, on the night Brittany vanished, he and Jack were driving around the neighborhood, smoking crack. They stopped in front of Brittany's house, and Jack decided to enter the house to discuss some matters with her father. When he entered, the house was empty except for Brittany. 5 minutes later, Jack returned to the car with Brittany, who sat in the back seat. Tommy was perplexed and asked what was happening, but Brittany remained silent, gazing downward. Jack informed him that he would take Tommy home. Tommy alleged that Jack drove him home, and when he exited the car, Brittany, who was sitting in the back, also got out and moved to the front passenger seat. Subsequently, Tommy and Jack drove away. The next day, when they met again, Jack didn't mention the previous day's events. They stopped at a car wash, where Jack gave his car an unusually thorough cleaning, washing both the interior and exterior. The car wash attendant joked about this, but Jack became angry, warning him to mind his own business or face the consequences. Tommy later explained that when he heard about Brittany's disappearance, he suspected Jack might be involved. He asked Jack directly what he had done with the girl. Jack became furious at the question, claiming he had simply driven her home and left. He rudely told Tommy not to ask again if he didn't want trouble. Tommy assumed that Jack had taken Brittany to the woods to rape her, believing that Jack had originally planned to use Lori's intimate services that night, but was thwarted when she wasn't at home. The detectives knew they had found their man when they arrived to arrest Jack. He was holding a can of gasoline, looking like he was about to set his car on fire, likely to destroy evidence. A search of the car revealed bloodstains, which forensic tests confirmed belonged to Brittany. Further investigation showed that Jack had visited a car wash after being with Brittany, and the police seized the vacuum cleaner he used. Criminologists found sand particles stuck together with Brittany's blood inside the vacuum, leaving no doubt about its origin. Although the police had gathered strong evidence, Jack refused to admit to kidnapping and murdering Brittany and remained silent about the case. The detectives interviewed Jack's acquaintances, and most of them believed he was capable of murder, describing him as a man who would stop at nothing. Despite being unemployed, Jack always seemed to have money. During the investigation, a patrol officer reported seeing a car parked on the side of the road near the woods on the night of Brittany's disappearance. The car belonged to Jack. At the time, the officer was unaware that Brittany was missing. When questioned, Jack claimed he was searching for his dog, which had run off into the woods. This information led the search for Brittany's body to focus on the area where the officer spotted Jack's car. Despite an extensive search involving police officers, K-9 units, helicopters, and volunteers, no body was found. Investigators theorized that Brittany, desperate for a ride to her boyfriend's house that night, asked Jack for a lift when he arrived at her home. Jack agreed to drive her, but instead, he took his friend Tommy home and then raped and killed Brittany, taking advantage of the situation. To prove this, however, the police needed to find her body. As the police attempted to question Jack and obtain a confession, a new witness emerged. A woman with a troubled past, who had previously been held hostage by Jack for months, called the police. She claimed that if Jack was indeed responsible for Brittany's murder, she might know where he had hidden her body. During her captivity, she had gained intimate knowledge of Jack's habits, frequent haunts, and secrets, which she was willing to share with the police. One day, a woman recounted how the suspect had shown her a location near a power line and told her it was an ideal spot to bury a body, as it was unlikely anyone would ever find it. Initially, the detectives were skeptical, but they began questioning her. She described the site as being in Lakewood, with sandy soil. This detail sparked a memory for the police, as an informant had previously mentioned that the suspect had complained about the difficulty of burying a body in sandy soil. The authorities decided to search the area the woman had described, which was just 3 miles from Brittany's home. Despite conducting an extensive search over several days, they found nothing. However, they persisted, motivated by the similarity between the sand found in the vacuum cleaner used by the suspect at the car wash and the soil in the area. Over 100 people searched the dense forest on the border of Monmouth and Ocean counties daily. Finally, on Tuesday, July 27, 2004, 15 days after Brittany was reported missing, her grave was discovered. 3 New Jersey K-9 officers, who had joined the search on the weekend, found her body. The naked body of the young girl was found in a hole, with a necklace bearing her name hanging around her neck. The detectives immediately confirmed it was Brittany's body. The medical examiner performed an autopsy but was unable to determine the exact cause of death due to the decomposition of the body over 2 weeks. The examiner could not rule out strangulation or suffocation, as Brittany had suffered both head trauma and strangulation. Brittany's body showed no clear signs of sexual assault, although the medical examiner did not exclude the possibility of rape having taken place. Jack ultimately decided to accept a plea bargain after consulting with his lawyer. Brittany's family also agreed to the deal to avoid a lengthy and draining trial. According to Jack, Brittany asked him to drop her off at her boyfriend's house, and he agreed. First, he drove Tommy home, and then he planned to take Brittany to her boyfriend's house. But before doing so, he pulled over to the side of the road and started smoking crack. This enraged Brittany, who began yelling at him and slapped him on the arm. This angered Jack, and he started punching Brittany. He admitted to punching her in the face and head at least twice because she tried to intervene and stop him from smoking. After Brittany was beaten, she started making gasping and gurgling sounds. Meanwhile, Jack was getting high as blood flowed from her nose and mouth. When he finally paid attention to her, Brittany had stopped breathing. He realized she was dead and decided to get rid of the body. However, the authorities didn't believe his story because the medical examiner found signs of strangulation on Brittany's body that Jack had left out. Additionally, he couldn't explain why Brittany was found without any clothes. The prosecution thought the crime was motivated by sexual intentions, and an Ocean County grand jury accused Jack of murder on February 9, 2005. Jack later admitted to purposely and knowingly causing serious bodily injury that resulted in death on October 18, 2005. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison without parole on January 13, 2006. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Maria Munoz. Maria Munoz was born on January 25, 1989, to Marisol Rodriguez and Jorge Luis Munoz, and was one of 3 children. Growing up in a loving and vibrant household in Puerto Rico, Maria faced a devastating loss when her mother passed away at a young age. It was around this time that she met Joel Pellet. Despite this hardship, Maria took on the responsibility of caring for her siblings, Marisol Munoz and Peter Hernandez. Maria and Pellet, who was 11 years older, initially met in Puerto Rico, where Maria was born and raised. At the time, Pellet was a nursing student with ambitious dreams, and Maria was also pursuing a nursing career. Despite their age difference, they got married in 2011. Following their marriage, the couple relocated to Laredo, Texas, where Pellet secured a prestigious position as a nurse anesthetist at a local hospital, earning a substantial income. Their newfound financial stability enabled them to live a life of opulence, marked by luxury cars and extravagant vacations. Maria Munoz, a devoted mother, lived in Laredo, Texas, with her husband, Joel Pellet, 40, and their 2 young sons. After leaving her job, she dedicated herself to caring for her family full-time. Maria adored her boys and prioritized their needs, taking them to the park daily and reading to them before bedtime. Although she savored every moment at home, she also made time for her passion, playing the piano. Despite her contentment, Maria held on to her aspiration of furthering her education and resuming her nursing career. Pellet's relationship seemed perfect, but beneath the surface, a different story emerged. After his second son's birth in 2018, people noticed changes in his behavior. He lost weight, gained muscle, and became flirtatious with other women. He stopped posting family photos, instead sharing solo pictures, giving the impression of a single, carefree life. Pellet's colleagues noticed his growing closeness to surgical nurse Janet Arando. As time passed, it became clear they were having a secretive affair. In 2020, Maria found airline tickets Pellet bought for himself and Janet to travel to Europe. This discovery left Maria shattered, feeling betrayed and devastated by their decade-long facade. She sought a therapist's help to cope with her emotional turmoil and was prescribed medication to support her mental health struggles. Around this time, Maria started writing in journals to cope with her thoughts and feelings. As tensions between Pellet and Maria increased, a confrontation occurred on September 19, 2020, when Maria visited Janet's house and found Pellet's car parked in the driveway. Maria confronted Pellet, forcing him to choose between her and Janet. Pellet chose Janet, leading to an argument that prompted Janet to call the police. However, Maria and Pellet had left before the police arrived. Later, the police called Maria while she was in the car with Pellet, and they could hear him yelling at her in the background. Once they got home, Pellet's anger escalated, and he punched a hole in Maria's car windshield, demonstrating his intense anger. The next morning, on September 20th, Maria sent Pellet a text message stating her intention to hire a lawyer to resolve their situation. However, Pellet responded, suggesting they handle the matter without lawyers, as he believed it would be too expensive. Just hours after their text conversation, Pellet appeared to have a change of heart. He emailed Maria, expressing his profound sadness and inner turmoil. In the email, he conveyed his desire to have a genuine and calm conversation with Maria, free from argument. Maria replied, and they agreed to meet the following evening, around 5 p.m. on Monday, September 21st. Before meeting him, Maria was extremely nervous and messaged her friend Yasmin Martinez about the planned meeting. Unfortunately, the encounter ended in a terrifying way. The next day, September 22nd, 2020, Pellet frantically called 911, saying his wife might have taken prescription pills and was no longer breathing. Officer DEA Cruz arrived at Pellet's house around 1:40 a.m., with his body cam recording the entire scene. He found Pellet at the top of the stairs, near the main bedroom, where he was still wearing his green hospital scrubs and performing CPR on his wife. Their 2 sons were asleep in nearby rooms. Once the paramedics arrived, they took over CPR efforts on Maria. Officer asked Pellet about pills Maria took. Pellet fetched a bottle with clonazepam prescription from the bathroom, but it was in his name, not Maria's. The bottle was unusually back in the cabinet. Body cam footage showed Pellet pocketing the pill container. DEA Cruz suspected he concealed something. A needle catheter on the stairs and a medical bag with syringes outside a clinical setting raised more questions. Pellet informed the officers that Maria had been battling severe depression lately, which had taken a toll on her mental health. According to him, her desperation to deal with her overwhelming emotions led her to take the pills as a last resort. Despite efforts, Maria was pronounced dead at 3:58 a.m. Pellet was questioned, explaining he and Maria had a conversation, became intimate, and he took a shower. When he returned, Maria was unresponsive and not breathing. Officer notices Pellet's suspicious behavior, excessive sweating and evasive answers, contrasting with others. This raises suspicions, and Sergeant Lismata takes him in for questioning. Upon arrival, Pellet was left alone in the interrogation room for a period before an officer entered. Unbeknownst to Pellet, his actions were being recorded on video. When the officers reviewed the footage, they were shocked to see Pellet's sudden, extreme behavior. He began screaming, crying, hitting the walls, and throwing furniture around the room. His loud, out-of-control outburst caused a stir among people in the hallway and nearby rooms, who were frightened by the commotion coming from his room. Sergeant Louis Mata spoke with Pellet at 4 a.m. Pellet confessed to having an affair with Janet, whom he'd left the family home for 5 months prior. Maria knew about it. Pellet visited the family home, they talked and became intimate. He gave her clonazepam for anxiety and depression, but didn't know how much she took. He found her unresponsive 10 minutes later. After questioning, Maria's autopsy was performed just 8 hours after her death. This timely autopsy allowed for detection of any substances in her stomach contents. The results revealed a surprise: no pill fragments, but a small, red pinprick mark on her elbow, suggesting an injection. This finding shifted the investigation's focus. Maria's journal, found by investigators, revealed her anxiety and depression struggles. Her writings exposed her deep love for her husband and desire to save their family despite his infidelity. Entries disclosed her husband's abuse, her grief, and her longing to escape sadness. One plea read, "I don't want to be sad anymore. Bring me laughter, bring me peace, bring me happiness again." The day before Maria Muñoz's untimely death, she wrote in her journal, revealed her desire to live and move forward with her life. There was no hint of suicide or plans to end her life. As a result, after reviewing her journal, investigators initially ruled out suicide as a possibility. They needed more information to understand what had really happened. Sergeants Mata and Cruz received toxicology test results contradicting Pellet's claim about Maria having clonazepam. Instead, the tests revealed 7 surgical drugs in her system: morphine, Demerol, Versed, propofol, ketamine, Leanne, and Naren. Notably, propofol and ketamine are sedatives and pain management drugs, typically used intravenously during operations. The discovery of propofol in Maria's body was the most startling revelation for the investigators. Given his profession as a nurse anesthetist, they suspected that Pellet would have had access to the drug. Dr. Hunzinger, who had worked with Pellet and was familiar with propofol, was shocked by the unusually high amount found in Maria's system, the highest he had ever seen. This led the doctors to strongly suspect that propofol was the direct cause of Maria's death, as Pellet would have known the correct dosage to sedate someone or cause an overdose. Furthermore, a small mark on Maria's arm suggested that she may have been injected with a substance. The investigators believed they had sufficient evidence to arrest Pellet for his wife's murder, based on the toxicological report, his suspicious behavior, and Maria's journal. An arrest warrant was quickly obtained, and DEA Cruz promptly apprehended Pellet, who offered no resistance, almost as if he had anticipated his arrest. Pellet was then taken to the police station, marking the beginning of a new phase in the investigation as law enforcement officials prepared to question him further about the events surrounding Maria's tragic death. The trial began on March 21, 2023, with both the prosecution and defense presenting their arguments. The prosecution team, comprising only women and dubbed Maria's team, built a strong case against Pellet by using Maria Muñoz's journal entries. This approach aimed to showcase Maria's personality to the jury, highlighting her qualities as a wife and mother. Through her journals, the prosecutors painted a picture of Maria as a caring, intelligent, and excellent mother, conveying her lively spirit to the jurors. During the trial, prosecutors suspected that Pellet drugged Maria by putting substances in her drink, making her sleepy. After she became unconscious, they believed he injected propofol into her arm. Prosecutors also thought Pellet deliberately delayed calling 911 so that responders would be unable to rescue Maria when they arrived. The journals helped prosecutors understand the challenges Maria faced, strengthening their resolve to seek justice in her case. Pellet's lawyer, Roberto Bali, argued that his client wanted to reconcile with wife Maria Muñoz before her death, citing uncertain cause of death and insufficient evidence. Bali noted Pellet gave Maria a drug to reverse overdoses on the night she died, and both struggled with addiction, with no signs of force or coercion. After investigating Maria's social circles, friends, and family, it became clear that she was not a drug addict. It was evident that Pellet was the only person who could have provided her with the substantial quantity of propofol found in her system. Additionally, authorities convinced Pellet's girlfriend, Janet Avendano, a surgical nurse, to testify against him. She revealed that Pellet had confided in her, admitting that he gave Maria something to calm her down. Avendano also confirmed that Pellet had brought drugs, including propofol, home from work. The jury reached a verdict in under an hour, following a 9-day trial. On March 30, 2023, the jury found Pellet guilty of Maria's murder. He was subsequently sentenced to life in prison on April 27, 2023, plus an additional 10 years and a $10,000 fine for tampering with evidence. Joel Pellet is currently imprisoned for life at a Texas Department of Criminal Justice facility, serving time for his cruel actions. His imprisonment serves as a reminder that criminals will be held accountable and that Maria's memory will be honored through the pursuit of truth and justice. The reason behind Maria's murder is still unclear, but according to the prosecution, Joel Pellet killed his wife to end their marriage and start a new life with his girlfriend, Janet Avendano. In the end, justice prevailed, and the verdict ensured that Pellet was punished for his crime. The jury's decision brings some closure to this tragic case, sending a clear message that such brutal acts will not go unpunished. The conviction highlights the importance of upholding justice and serves as a warning to those who commit similar crimes that they will face the full force of the law. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Mary Catherine Higdon. Mary Catherine Higdon, born in 1994, was a lively child who spread joy wherever she went. Her infectious laughter and humor brought delight to those around her, often with her quick wit and impressive impersonations. She loved taking leisurely strolls around town with her pet frog perched on a shoestring, proudly showing it off to everyone. From a young age, Mary had a deep appreciation for nature and animals, spending hours exploring the outdoors and marveling at the beauty of the natural world. Aside from being an entertainment enthusiast, Mary had a passion for performing. She would often stage plays for her family, captivating them with her creativity and boundless imagination. As she grew older, Mary was introduced to firearms and developed a strong interest in them. She learned the importance of handling guns responsibly, respecting their power and potential. Over time, her skills improved and she became an accomplished marksman with a growing passion for guns. Mary Catherine met her soulmate, Stephen Freeman, in high school. Born on January 1st, 1995, in Griffin, Georgia, Stephen grew up in a close-knit family with his parents and brother. He was a happy child with many friends who described him as laid-back, kind, and helpful. Stephen's family was very important to him, especially his mother, with whom he shared a special bond. He loved spending time outdoors, enjoying activities like hiking, camping, fishing, and hunting. Mary Catherine and Stephen quickly formed a strong connection in high school, united by their shared passion for the outdoors. Their love for nature brought them together, and their relationship flourished as they explored the great outdoors, whether hiking, camping, fishing, or hunting. This connection served as the foundation of their deep and enduring relationship. Mary Catherine and Stephen's high school graduation marked the start of a new era in their lives as a couple. They decided to take their relationship to the next level by moving in together in a house in Griffin, Georgia. The couple was ecstatic about having their own space and starting a new life. Mary Catherine had become an integral part of Stephen's family, with his mother treating her like a daughter. She welcomed Mary Catherine into their family with open arms, and the couple felt grateful for her love and support. Every Sunday, Mary Catherine and Stephen would visit Stephen's parents for a big family dinner. This weekly tradition brought the family closer together and solidified Mary Catherine's place within it. Over time, Stephen's friends also grew to appreciate Mary Catherine. Initially, they had reservations about the couple's relationship, but as they spent more time together, they realized how well-suited the pair were. They admired how Mary Catherine brought happiness and joy into Stephen's life and shared his passion for the outdoors. Stephen, a metal worker, repaired roofs. His wife, Mary Catherine, had two jobs: part-time teacher's assistant and sales at a sporting goods store, where she learned gun safety from coworker Thomas Skinner. This complemented Stephen's passion for firearms as an avid hunter and target shooter with multiple guns, including a Glock 42 at home for protection. By summer 2018, Mary Catherine and Stephen had been in a 5-year relationship in Griffin, Georgia. Tragically, it came to an end on August 1st. That day, Mary Catherine made a frantic 911 call, screaming that she had accidentally shot Stephen. When police arrived at their apartment, they found Mary Catherine in a state of distress, crying and hyperventilating over Stephen's motionless body. Despite his still being alive with a chest wound, Mary Catherine was screaming that she couldn't lose him. An ambulance rushed Stephen to the hospital, where doctors made efforts to save his life. But unfortunately, he eventually succumbed to his injuries. Mary Catherine visited the police station to explain the shooting incident. She claimed that she had accidentally shot Stephen while handing him a gun, which he normally kept beside his bed for protection. However, the police officers detected the smell of alcohol on her breath and noticed discrepancies in her account, which shifted from handing the gun to tossing it. The police were skeptical, knowing that a tossed gun would not fire on its own, and the nature of the wound suggested that Mary Catherine had deliberately pointed the gun at Stephen. During the interview, Mary Catherine eventually confessed that she had acted out of anger. Although the police had recorded the interview, there was only feedback during the crucial moment when she admitted to shooting Stephen out of anger. Nevertheless, despite the missing recording, the police were convinced that they had collected sufficient forensic evidence to prove that Mary Catherine had intentionally shot her boyfriend Stephen. At the apartment of Mary Catherine and Stephen, police found evidence of a heated argument before Stephen was shot. Scattered food suggested a prior altercation. This was the 6th time police had been called to the residence in the past year due to domestic disturbances. Despite Mary Catherine's claims, the gun used in the shooting was found to have been loaded that night. Traces of grease on the gun and magazine led the police to conclude that Mary Catherine, who was cooking dinner at the time, had loaded the weapon after shooting Stephen. Stephen's friends told police their relationship was marked by frequent arguments, possessiveness, and verbal abuse from Mary Catherine. Friends saw her as mentally unstable, causing tension. When Stephen tried to distance himself, she'd bombard him with texts and calls, forcing him to block her. One friend revealed Mary Catherine pulled a gun on Stephen multiple times, but he didn't report it, fearing trouble for her. Stephen's friends were stunned when they learned that Mary Catherine had accidentally shot him, especially since they knew she was familiar with firearms. However, what they were unaware of was that 3 months earlier, Stephen had confided in a friend that Mary Catherine had a disturbing episode where she ran around outside, screaming at the top of her lungs, and even attempted to shoot both him and herself. Furthermore, just a month before the incident, Stephen had shared with another friend that although Mary Catherine had previously threatened him with a gun, this time her eyes had a look that genuinely terrified him, making him believe she might actually carry out her threat. Stephen's friends told police he'd been tired of Mary Catherine's behavior and planned to leave her after 7 years. He intended to move away without telling her, fearing her reaction. On July 30th, 2018, Stephen sent Mary Catherine a friendly text, but the next night, he ignored her calls and texts after a fight. Mary Catherine was cooking dinner when she noticed Stephen was missing. She called his mom, who said he was with a friend. Enraged, Mary Catherine drove to the friend's house to confront him. When she arrived, she saw Stephen in the truck and began yelling at him. He tried to calm her down, saying he was heading home. Stephen's friend said Mary Catherine pulled a gun on him multiple times, but she denied it. She admitted threatening suicide with a gun, though. His mom believed Mary Catherine's threats kept Stephen from leaving, fearing she'd harm herself if he did. Mary Catherine said Stephen escalated the situation, becoming violent, throwing dinner in her face. She claimed self-defense, grabbing a gun to scare him off, but he lunged at her, and as she backed away, she saw he was bleeding from the chest. At the time of the shooting, Mary Catherine didn't share her account of events with the police because she was too embarrassed to reveal that Stephen had a history of violence towards her, including hitting her in the past and being controlling. In fact, she claimed that on one occasion, he kicked her out of bed so forcefully that her head hit the door frame. However, Stephen's friends described their relationship differently, saying they had seen Mary Catherine hit Stephen, including an incident where she slapped him hard in the face. By contrast, Mary Catherine's sister offered a different view, stating that 2 weeks before the shooting, she had seen bruises on Mary Catherine's arm. Mary Catherine's sister said Mary Catherine confided in her about Stephen's physical attack. The police investigation found Stephen's death was a murder. Mary Catherine was arrested and charged with murder and other crimes. She refused a plea deal and chose to go to trial, claiming she shot Stephen in self-defense to protect herself from his aggression. A year after Stephen's death, Mary Catherine's trial began, revealing the tumultuous nature of their relationship. Her defense team argued that she acted in self-defense, citing Stephen's history of aggressive and abusive behavior as justification for her actions. To support their claim, they presented evidence to the jury that demonstrated Stephen's controlling, manipulative, and dangerous nature, which had led Mary Catherine to fear for her safety. Mary Catherine testified tearfully about years of abuse by Stephen, recounting a disturbing pattern of physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual mistreatment. She described his attacks, belittling, and disregard for her humanity, saying his abuse knew no bounds, leaving her trapped and terrified. Mary Catherine's defense presented a text from Stephen, saying he'd punish her when he got home. Mary Catherine testified that meant physical abuse, and if she defended herself, he'd hit her harder. Another text shown in court read, "Don't hit me, or I'll hit you back 2 times harder." Mary Catherine testified that Stephen had a red room, like in 50 Shades of Grey, where they had aggressive and violent sex. She provided a text from Stephen saying, "You're going to the red room," to back her claim. Mary Catherine also alleged Stephen assaulted her twice, once after a Disney World trip, saying she felt uncomfortable with their increasingly aggressive sex and asked him to stop. But he intensified his efforts, claiming she owed him for gifts. The defense presented text messages from Stephen to support Mary Catherine's abuse claims. These messages were vulgar, threatening, and showed a pattern of verbal assaults. Over 60 pages of messages showcased Stephen's abuse, including one disturbing message where he held a dead fish, captioned, "This is you." Another message presented to the court was one from Stephen after Mary Catherine cheated on him, in which he wrote that he was going to wreck her for wrecking him. Furthermore, the defense alleged that Stephen had a drug and alcohol addiction that contributed to his violent outbursts. Mary Catherine said she broke up with Stephen, not the other way around. She claimed he got angry and threatened her, so she grabbed a gun in self-defense. Her last words to him before firing were, "Get out of my house." Stephen's friends and family disputed Mary Catherine's claims that he was violent and abusive, knowing him as friendly and caring. His mom denied knowledge of disturbing texts and threats, but claimed he only said hurtful things out of anger. Mary Catherine was questioned about not reporting Stephen's alleged abuse. The state also pointed out she searched for violent, explicit images online hours before the shooting, claiming she did it to please Stephen. The state argued she'd changed her story about the shooting at least 10 times since her initial interview. Evidence in court included a text from Stephen to Mary Catherine, saying she'd previously pointed a gun at him, and his friends testified about witnessing her abuse towards him, supporting the state's claim that she was violent towards him, not the other way around. Jurors deliberated for 4 hours before acquitting Mary Catherine of malice murder, felony murder, and lesser charges. Shocked family and friends expected a guilty verdict, but jurors later revealed they believed Mary Catherine intentionally killed Stephen. However, they couldn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt due to lack of evidence, making it hard to distinguish murder from self-defense. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ryan Poston. Ryan Poston was born on December 30th, 1982, in Fort Mitchell, Kentucky, to Lisa and Jay Poston. He had a strong and loving bond with his 3 sisters, Allison, Catherine, and Elizabeth, throughout his life. Growing up, Ryan had the opportunity to travel extensively and attend schools in Switzerland and the Philippines. This exposure broadened his horizons and gave him an adventurous spirit. Ryan was also known for his striking good looks, which, coupled with his charismatic personality, made him stand out in a crowd. After graduating from high school, Ryan attended Indiana University, where he earned a degree in political science, history, and geography. He excelled academically and graduated with honors in 2005. Following in the footsteps of his family members, Ryan pursued a career in law. He enrolled in the Salmon P. Chase College of Law at Northern Kentucky University. Driven by his admiration for the legal profession, his esteemed grandfather and uncle, both practicing attorneys, were his role models. Ryan's ultimate goal was to own a successful law firm. While in Cincinnati, Ohio, Ryan dedicated himself to helping people who couldn't afford expensive lawyers. Despite being young, he had already built a strong reputation, and many sought his advice. He worked hard to ensure everyone had access to fair and competent legal representation, regardless of their financial situation. After a painful breakup in 2011, Ryan turned to his cousin Carissa for comfort and support. During a visit to Lexington, Kentucky to spend time with her, he met Shayna Hubers, a Lexington native, and his life took an unexpected turn. Shayna Hubers embodied the quintessential Southern girl, renowned for her outgoing personality and effortless ability to form friendships. Her warm and charming demeanor naturally drew people to her. After graduating high school in 2009 with a full scholarship, she continued her education at the University of Kentucky, majoring in psychology, before pursuing her master's degree in psychology at Eastern Kentucky University. Despite their 8-year age gap, Ryan was 29, while Shayna was just 21. Their feelings for each other grew increasingly undeniable. With each visit Ryan made to see his cousin Carissa in Lexington, he found himself devoting more time to Shayna. As they spent more time together, their bond deepened. Shayna began spending more time in Highland Heights, the Kentucky suburb where Ryan lived. Every weekend, she would pack a bag and visit Ryan's home, dedicating herself to taking care of him, cooking his meals, and cleaning his living space. As time went on, Ryan and Shayna's relationship grew stronger, and he took her to meet his parents. She was over the moon with excitement, telling her friends all about Ryan and even saying she wanted to become Mrs. Ryan Poston. But their promising future came to a tragic end on October 12, 2012. In a panicked call to the police, Shayna admitted to fatally shooting her boyfriend, Ryan. The details she shared revealed a devastating scene of domestic violence that had spun out of control. According to Shayna, Ryan had tried to physically abuse her, dragging her out of the house when she attempted to gather her belongings. She told the 911 dispatcher that Ryan had confronted her with a gun, leading to a physical fight. In the heat of the moment, Shayna managed to grab the gun, but she was intimidated by Ryan's size. In a state of panic, she pulled the trigger, ultimately shooting Ryan. Shayna admitted that she believed Ryan's death was inevitable, so she claimed she wanted to end his suffering. She told the 911 dispatcher that Ryan was in distress, making unusual sounds, which motivated her to shoot him several more times. Afterwards, she revealed that she left the gun on a bookshelf. Minutes after Shayna called 911 to report that she had shot her boyfriend, officers were sent to the scene. When they arrived, they told Shayna to come out of the apartment with her hands up. At first, she was hesitant, but she eventually followed their orders. As she walked out, they told her to lie face down on the ground. It was clear that Shayna was very upset as she complied with their instructions. After the officers handcuffed Shayna and put her in the back of their patrol car, they entered the apartment and found Ryan Poston's body on the dining room floor, covered in blood. Crime scene investigators arrived and examined Ryan's condo, which looked a bit messy, but nothing out of the ordinary for a 29-year-old man. They found that Ryan had a concealed carry permit and owned weapons, including the Sig Sauer semi-automatic gun that Shayna used to shoot him. Based on the evidence they gathered, the investigators concluded that Ryan was sitting at the table when Shayna opened fire. They knew this because of the blood found on the table. However, the fact that several items on the dining room table were not disturbed raised doubts about Shayna's story. If there had been a fight, the items would have been disturbed. The crime scene investigators thoroughly searched Ryan's apartment, gathering every detail. At the same time, police officers questioned Ryan's neighbors to see if they had any information that could help the case. One of Ryan's neighbors, a woman named Nikki, spoke to the detective and provided some useful insights. Nikki knew Shayna well and thought that Shayna was more committed to Ryan than he was to her. According to Nikki, the couple often had loud, angry arguments that disturbed the neighborhood. Nikki remembered a specific incident several months ago when Shayna came to her door in tears, saying she was afraid of Ryan. Shayna had told Nikki that she and Ryan had a violent fight, during which he lifted her up and threw her down the hallway, causing her injuries. Nikki believed Shayna and encouraged her to report the abuse to the police, but Shayna decided not to take legal action. At the police station, detectives took Shayna to an interrogation room to question her about the shooting of her boyfriend, Ryan. Before starting the interview, the officers read Shayna her Miranda rights, reminding her that she had the right to have an attorney present. Shayna chose to exercise this right and asked for a lawyer to be present. While waiting in the interrogation room, Shayna filled out some paperwork under the supervision of a detective. Despite having asked for a lawyer, Shayna still chatted with the detective. When asked who the victim was, Shayna calmly replied that it was the man she had killed. This response showed a clear lack of emotion, as it was obvious she knew the victim was Ryan, her long-term boyfriend. Shayna remained in the interrogation room with the detectives, maintaining that she had acted in self-defense. She recounted the events of the previous night, describing how Ryan had allegedly grabbed her by the throat and violently thrown her around the apartment. At some point during the investigation, the detective temporarily left the room, replaced by another officer. Shayna began to reveal more details about her encounter with Ryan to this new officer. She alleged that Ryan had been extremely aggressive prior to the shooting, hurling insults at her, calling her crazy, and taunting her while brandishing a gun. Shayna believed that Ryan's behavior that night was fueled by drug use, which contributed to his violent outbursts. Throughout the interview, Shayna consistently stuck to her version of the events that culminated in the shooting. She claimed that Ryan was sitting at the dining room table, handling ammunition for his Sig Sauer pistol, when she noticed him staring aggressively at her from across the table. At that moment, she became aware of his intentions and realized he was trying to evict her from his condo. Shayna confessed to picking up the gun and firing it in the midst of the chaos, hitting Ryan with a single bullet. Shayna continued to describe the incident, claiming that after shooting Ryan once, she saw him twitching. Believing it was necessary to end his suffering, she fired multiple shots, ultimately killing him. In her confession, Shayna told the detective that Ryan was vain and had mentioned wanting a nose job, so she decided to grant him his wish. She deliberately aimed her gun at his face and pulled the trigger, essentially giving him the rhinoplasty he had requested. During the intense interrogation, Shayna expressed deep concerns about the impact of the incident on her academic performance and her future romantic relationships. She confided in the detective that having a dead boyfriend would make it difficult for her to find someone to marry, especially if they discovered she had killed him in self-defense. Despite her statement, the detective arrested and charged her with Ryan's murder. Shayna seemed genuinely surprised by her arrest, maintaining that she had acted in self-defense. In 2015, Shayna's trial began, and the courtroom was filled with anticipation. The prosecutor compared Shayna to Jodi Arias, who had also been charged with murdering her boyfriend, Travis Alexander, emphasizing the striking similarities between the two cases. This heightened the tension in the courtroom as everyone awaited the outcome. The prosecutor argued that Shayna was fixated on her ex-boyfriend, Ryan. According to the prosecution, Ryan dominated Shayna's thoughts, and she constantly discussed him. During the trial, the prosecutor presented testimony from Ryan's friends, who described his plans to end the relationship with Shayna and his efforts to avoid her phone calls and messages. Despite this, Shayna continued to visit Ryan's condo in Highland Heights uninvited, including on the night of the murder. The prosecution introduced evidence that Ryan had scheduled a date with Audrey Bolt, a former Miss Ohio, on the night of the murder. This information supported the prosecution's theory that Shayna was driven by jealousy and anger towards Ryan's potential new love interest. Audrey Bolt testified that she was supposed to meet Ryan for drinks at a bar on the night of the murder, but he failed to appear. It wasn't until later that she learned of his murder. The prosecution also presented evidence that Ryan had repeatedly expressed his desire to end the relationship with Shayna in the days leading up to his death. Ryan had sought advice from his father, Jay, on how to handle the situation, and Jay had counseled him to be kind to Shayna to avoid a messy breakup. However, it appears that Shayna continued to exert control over Ryan on the day he was killed. The prosecution presented evidence of several text exchanges between Ryan and Shayna, in which Ryan clearly told her he did not want to see her that weekend because he had other commitments. Nevertheless, Shayna showed up uninvited at his condo, which was not unusual for her. The argument that ensued reached a boiling point when Ryan explicitly told Shayna their relationship was over and she could no longer control him. Prosecutors argued that this statement enraged Shayna, prompting her to pick up a gun and fatally shoot Ryan. During Shayna's trial for murdering Ryan, the prosecution showed a video of her being questioned by the police to suggest she was a cold-blooded killer. In the video, Shayna's calm behavior and responses seemed to back up the idea that she had intentionally taken Ryan's life. The footage showed her dancing and singing along to music, which seemed unusual for someone who had just killed their loved one in self-defense. Normally, people in such a situation would be distraught and crying due to the loss of life and the weight of their actions. The prosecution's goal in showing the video was to make Shayna appear detached and unemotional, implying that her actions were not those of someone who had acted in self-defense. They claimed that her lack of tears and carefree behavior proved her guilt. However, this interpretation was open to debate and up to the jury to decide. In the end, the video was a key piece of evidence in the prosecution's case against Shayna, but it was just one part of the evidence presented during the trial. Shayna's defense team stuck to a clear storyline throughout her trial, arguing that Ryan was the aggressive and violent one on the night of the incident, leading Shayna to shoot him. To back up this claim, they built a picture of Ryan's mental state, suggesting that a mix of drugs he was taking, including anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines, contributed significantly to his behavior. The defense team presented the jury with autopsy results showing the presence of these drugs in Ryan's system, strengthening their argument that the drugs influenced his actions. An expert toxicologist testified for Shayna, stating that a combination of drugs like anti-anxiety medications and amphetamines could cause someone to become violent and paranoid. This testimony aimed to provide a reasonable explanation for Shayna's actions, implying that she may not have intended to harm Ryan. During Shayna's trial in April 2015, the prosecution grew increasingly worried that she might be acquitted due to being a smart, young, and attractive woman, and that her self-defense claim might persuade the jury. However, on April 23rd, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, convicting Shayna of murdering her boyfriend, Ryan Poston. At the August 2015 sentencing hearing, Shayna persisted in shifting the blame for Ryan's death onto him, which infuriated his friends and family. Despite the overwhelming evidence presented during the trial, Shayna stuck to her claim of innocence and refused to acknowledge her role in the events. Under Kentucky law, a defendant who is deemed a victim of domestic violence can be eligible for early parole after serving just 20% of their sentence. However, the judge in this case ruled that Shayna did not meet the criteria, characterizing her crime as a premeditated murder. As a result, the judge handed down a 40-year prison sentence, making Shayna eligible for parole in 17 years, when she will be 41 years old in 2032. Shayna Hubers was sentenced, but she appealed for a new trial, which was granted by a judge in August 2016. The reason for the appeal was that one of the jurors had failed to disclose their felony conviction, which is against Kentucky law, since felons are not allowed to serve on juries. Following a 4-month delay, Shayna's second trial for the murder of Ryan Poston began in August 2018. During the opening arguments, Shayna's defense attorney claimed that throughout her year-and-a-half-long relationship with Ryan, Shayna tried her best to make him happy. However, their romance suffered because of it. The attorney stated that on the very first night Shayna and Ryan met, he was violent toward her, both physically and sexually. This incident had a lasting effect on her, and it took her several weeks to respond to his messages after that. Shayna's defense lawyers claimed that her high school experience of sexual assault led to a history of alcohol abuse and promiscuity. They argued that this traumatic event contributed to her behavior on the night of the murder. The defense team aimed to create a sympathetic image of Shayna, highlighting her troubled past and arguing that she was not responsible for her actions on the night of the murder. They sought to challenge the prosecution's narrative, suggesting that her behavior was the result of a combination of factors, including a history of abuse and a toxic relationship with Ryan. The defense portrayed Shayna as a victim of domestic violence at Ryan's hands, rather than as a cold-blooded murderer. They claimed that her actions were driven not by a desire for revenge or financial gain, but by years of abuse by her former partner. According to the defense, Ryan constantly criticized Shayna about her weight and chest size, pressuring her to enlarge her breasts. This constant pressure contributed to her low self-esteem and feelings of inadequacy, the defense argued. The defense claimed that Ryan and Shayna's sexual relationship was troubled, marked by frequent disagreements and frustration from both parties. According to the defense, Ryan yearned for a more romantic and intimate connection, but this desire was not fulfilled, leading to a growing rift between them. To support this claim, the defense presented evidence that Shayna had sought an injection to improve her romantic life, which was meant to address the couple's sexual difficulties and strengthen their bond. However, the defense argued that Ryan's consistent rejection and disinterest worsened the strain on their relationship, causing Shayna to become increasingly frustrated and isolated. Moreover, the defense alleged that Ryan often broke up with Shayna, only to engage in conversations with other women. In contrast, the prosecution stated that while Ryan Poston was not a perfect boyfriend, he was not abusive. They argued that Shayna did not act in self-defense when she fatally shot Ryan, but rather because he had ended their relationship that night. The prosecution claimed that it was time for Ryan to break up with Shayna, as she refused to leave him alone despite the breakup, demonstrating her inability to move on from the relationship. One of Ryan's co-workers testified that the breakup between Ryan and Shayna would be permanent this time because Ryan had always avoided breaking up with Shayna in person. According to the co-worker, Shayna had made every effort to keep Ryan. The prosecution presented text messages in which Shayna told her friends that she and Ryan's romantic encounters had brought them closer together. However, Shayna testified that these encounters had actually driven them apart. In another text message exchange, Shayna asked Ryan for sex, but Ryan was taking antidepressants, which had reduced his sex drive due to the medication's side effects. However, when Shayna testified, she claimed that Ryan had forced her into sexual intercourse. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury found Shayna guilty of murdering Ryan, despite contradictory testimonies and conflicting evidence. During the sentencing hearing, Shayna's mother emotionally addressed the judge, sharing stories of her daughter's singing talent, which had earned her multiple college scholarships. Through tears, she begged the jury to consider granting Shayna parole, arguing that her daughter still had the potential to positively impact people's lives. The mother acknowledged, however, that her pleas did not minimize the grief and pain experienced by Ryan Poston's family. Shayna was given a life sentence with no chance of parole. As part of her sentence, she must serve at least 17 years before becoming eligible for parole in 2032. She is currently serving her sentence at the Kentucky Correctional Institute for Women in Pewee Valley, Kentucky. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Mike Williams. Mike Williams was born on October 16, 1969 in Bradfordville, north of Tallahassee. He was the son of a bus driver and a kindergarten teacher. Family and friends called him Mike. Even though the family didn't have much money and Mike, along with his older brother, grew up living in a trailer, those were happy times. The parents cared about their son's future. Instead of building a house, they set aside money for the education of both boys, who themselves worked part-time at night in supermarkets. Mike enrolled in North Florida Christian High School, where he excelled. He became student council president, played soccer, and was active in the Key Club. At the age of 15, Mike started duck hunting as a hobby and met Denise Merrill. Denise was a cheerleader and council secretary, and they began dating. Friends thought they were a great couple. While still in high school, Mike became best friends with Brian Winchester, whom Denise had introduced him to. Brian later had a friend, Katie Thomas, and the two couples remained friends for the rest of Mike's life. After high school, Mike and Denise attended Florida State University, where they both majored in political science and urban planning. The lovers graduated together. Denise became a public accountant, and Mike became a real estate appraiser. Mike proved himself to be a dedicated and hard-working individual, consistently putting in 15-hour days, which led to rapid success in his career. In 1994, he married Denise, and around the same time, his friend Brian married Kathy. The four of them maintained a close and supportive relationship. Mike loved his wife deeply and was determined to provide for their family to the best of his ability. He had boundless energy and was a high achiever. By the age of 31, Mike Williams had achieved significant success as a real estate appraiser, earning a substantial annual income of nearly $200,000. This allowed the couple to purchase a comfortable home in an upscale neighborhood on the east side of town, and in 1999, they welcomed a daughter into their family. Although Mike was prudent, he had a tendency to engage in risky activities, which prompted his friends to warn Denise about them. To ensure his family's financial security, Mike sought the advice of his trusted friend Brian, who worked as an insurance agent. Brian sold Mike 2 life insurance policies, one worth $250,000 and another worth $500, providing financial protection for his loved ones in the event of an unforeseen disaster. In 2000, Mike's father died, which had a profound impact on Mike. To ensure his family's financial security, Mike turned to his friend Brian for help. Brian assisted Mike in getting a $1 million life insurance policy, adding to an existing policy and bringing the total coverage to nearly $2 million, just 6 months before Mike vanished. On December 16, 2000, their 6th wedding anniversary, Mike woke up early to go duck hunting on Lake Seminole, a large reservoir connected to the Apalachicola River. Denise and their daughter stayed at home, expecting Mike to return that day so they could celebrate their anniversary with a planned night out in Apalachicola, a small town on the bayou. However, Mike didn't come back, prompting Denise to become worried and call her father. Her father then contacted Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester. Brian and his father drove to Lake Seminole, where they found Mike's Ford Bronco parked near the boat dock, but Mike was missing. The search for Mike began, and after a few hours, a helicopter pilot located the boat drifting approximately 225 feet away from the boat ramp. Notably, Mike's shotgun was still in its case on board, indicating that he was never able to use it. This discovery led to a shift in the operation from a rescue mission to a recovery effort. Locals familiar with the area informed the search team that the location was previously an orchard, known as Stump Field, due to the numerous stumps both above and below the water level, which made navigating motorized boats through the area hazardous. The search team formulated a theory about what might have happened to Mike. He might have collided with a stump while operating his boat, fallen into the water, and become trapped, with his boots filling with water and ultimately causing him to drown. Several agencies, including a dive team from Montgomery, Alabama, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, participated in the search for Mike. Although they made an extensive and systematic effort, they did not find any signs of him. After a week, the search operation shifted its focus to a body recovery effort. Search teams used probe poles to scan the lake bottom and brought in dogs to assist. 10 days into the search, volunteers found a camouflage-patterned hunting hat, but it could not be confirmed as belonging to Mike. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency suggested that Mike might have been attacked by alligators, which could explain why his body was never found, given the lake's known alligator population. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement did not find any evidence of a violent death and supported this theory. The search was finally called off after 5 weeks. The day after the authorities gave up searching for Mike, Denise put together a memorial service to pay tribute to him. While it appeared to everyone that Denise had come to terms with losing her husband, Mike's mother was still grappling with the loss. 6 months down the line, in June 2001, a fisherman stumbled upon a sinister find: a pair of boots bobbing on the lake's surface. This prompted a team of divers to scour the lake, and they fished out a lightweight hunting jacket and flashlight from the depths. When they examined the jacket, they found a hunting license with Mike Williams' name and signature tucked away in one of its pockets. The discovery of the hunting jacket and boots raised many questions about Mike Williams' disappearance. The fact that neither item showed signs of an alligator attack and appeared to have been recently placed in the water rather than having been there for 6 months was suspicious. The boots, for example, were not slimy, and the flashlight still worked. Despite these inconsistencies, a week later, Denise's attorney requested that the court declare Mike Williams dead, citing the discovery of his belongings as evidence. The attorney suggested that alligators and other aquatic life had likely consumed his body whole. The court granted the motion, and the death certificate was issued, stating that Mike died on December 16, 2000, due to accidental drowning while duck hunting on Lake Seminole. However, Cheryl Williams, Mike's mother, refused to accept this conclusion and continued to search for her son. Her efforts caused tension with her former sister-in-law, Denise, who demanded that she stop searching and accept reality. Cheryl's persistence eventually led to a strained relationship between the two women, and Denise followed through on her threat. Undeterred, Cheryl spent the next 3 years fighting to have Mike's disappearance investigated. She made numerous phone calls, posted signs, wrote to the governor, compiled a book of evidence, and contacted reporters. Her persistence finally paid off when she convinced an alligator expert, Matthew Oresco, to get involved. Oresco explained that alligators don't feed during the cold winter months, and that there would always be forensic evidence left behind after an alligator kill. After 3 years, Cheryl Williams finally persuaded law enforcement to abandon the alligator attack theory and launch an official investigation into her son Mike's disappearance. The case was reopened based on newly uncovered facts about alligators' eating habits and evidence gathered from interviews and official data. Former investigator Ronnie Austin revealed that the general consensus among law enforcement agencies was that Mike's death was not accidental. Initially, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Agency took charge of the case, as Mike was considered a missing hunter. They spent 735 hours searching a 10-acre section of the lake for his body, but neglected to explore other possibilities. Subsequent investigations involved interviewing all those involved in the search, including police officer David Arnett, who was present at the scene. He pointed out several suspicious circumstances. Mike rarely hunted alone. His truck was found in an undeveloped area, and the severe storm that night should have pushed the boat to the east shore, yet it was found on the west shore. Furthermore, the boat's motor was not running, despite being full of gasoline. If Mike had fallen out of the boat while driving, it would have continued to float in circles until it ran out of gas. Unfortunately, law enforcement realized too late that they were not dealing with a simple drowning. By then, the crime scene had already been compromised by numerous volunteers and searchers. A car that could have been a vital clue was taken by the family without proper verification, and potential witnesses were overlooked. Denise Williams and Brian Winchester aroused the suspicion of investigators due to their sudden union. The fact that Winchester had divorced his wife Kathy and married Denise raised eyebrows. Further investigation revealed that Denise had received a substantial financial gain of nearly $2 million from her late husband's life insurance policy. Detectives discovered that Winchester was the one who had sold the policy to Mike. It was also peculiar that Denise, as Mike's wife, showed little interest in the investigation and actively tried to hinder Cheryl's efforts, even going so far as to forbid the grandmother from communicating with her granddaughter. When the newlywed couple was brought in for questioning, their statements failed to shed new light on the case. Brian provided an alibi, stating that he was 60 miles from the lake and at home in bed at the time of Mike's disappearance, which his ex-wife Kathy could corroborate. He claimed that he had intended to go hunting with his father-in-law that morning, but overslept. Denise's interrogation also yielded no new leads. In 2008, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement revealed that Mike's disappearance was not accidental, and they suspect he was a victim of a crime. However, due to the lack of sufficient evidence, they are unable to bring charges. Despite this, Cheryl Williams persisted, and her efforts led to the Discovery Cable channel featuring a story on Mike's disappearance and the subsequent investigations. By that time, Cheryl had become disenchanted with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, convinced that they were either incapable or uninterested in resolving the case. Starting in 2012, Mike's mother, Cheryl, began a campaign to push for a new investigator or special prosecutor in Mike's case. Over 9 years, she wrote a staggering 2,600 letters to Governor Rick Scott, pleading her case. Meanwhile, in 2012, Denise discovered that Brian was cheating on her, and they broke up. The following year, she filed for divorce. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, an appraisal of their former family home was scheduled, which would finally free them from their property disputes. This event marked a turning point in Mike's case. The breakup was acrimonious, with Brian refusing to accept the divorce and Denise refusing to continue the relationship. Their constant fighting was further complicated by the Williams investigation, which seemed to be mocking them. Brian continued to call Denise, but she stopped taking his calls. The stress was taking a toll on him. On August 5, 2016, the day of the scheduled real estate appraisal, Denise left her home to drive to her job at Florida State University. As she chatted with her sister on the phone, she noticed someone climbing into the back seat of her car. To her shock, it was Winchester. Brian, who had been hiding in the back seat, pressed a loaded gun against Denise's ribs and ordered her to drive straight ahead. He claimed he was forced to take this drastic measure because she had stopped answering his calls. Denise attempted to placate Brian by agreeing with everything he said and promising to give him a chance to salvage their marriage. Naively, Brian believed her. Denise reassured him that she wouldn't report the incident to the police, and Brian exited the car, taking with him the brown sheet, plastic sheeting, bleach sprayer, and tools. It became evident that Denise had narrowly escaped death. Denise promptly called emergency services, and Brian was swiftly arrested and charged with kidnapping, a first-degree felony in Florida carrying a maximum penalty of life imprisonment. He was also charged with domestic violence and armed burglary. The court ruled to detain Brian without bail. Cheryl Williams, hopeful that this development would shed light on her son's disappearance case, expressed optimism. Denise told the New York Daily News that she thought Brian was motivated by their wealth and prayed that he would reveal the truth. In a surprising turn of events, Brian cooperated, negotiating a lenient deal with the prosecutor and avoiding a life sentence. Brian began his confession by saying that initially, their marriage was going well, but he was a bad husband. He discovered a note in his first wife Kathy's purse, revealing her infidelity, and he sought revenge. They regularly socialized with Denise and Mike, going to bars and concerts together. Brian had known Denise since high school, but it wasn't until his girlfriend Kathy cheated on him that he started viewing Denise in a romantic light. The affair between Brian and Denise started in October 1997. What began as a drunken one-night stand at a rock concert soon turned into frequent secret trysts. They would meet at hotels during the workday whenever possible. Brian didn't want to divorce Kathy, but Denise made it clear she wouldn't leave her husband. She cared deeply about public opinion and didn't want to risk losing custody of her daughter. Over time, their affair evolved beyond casual sex. Denise and Brian saw themselves as a couple, exchanging gifts and love letters. It became apparent they couldn't continue like this. They couldn't bear to be apart. But divorce was off the table for Denise. Her reputation as a pious person had to remain intact. Then, Mike nearly died in a hunting accident, and Brian saved his life. Denise saw an opportunity to escape her predicament. After making a deal with the prosecutor, Brian will disclose that the year 2000 sparked discussions about Mike and Kathy's death. According to Brian, Denise had wanted to deflect responsibility, placing the blame solely on him and not herself. She had preferred a scenario in which their deaths would be viewed as an accident rather than a murder, thereby allowing her to convince herself that their fate was in God's hands, which would enable her to live with the consequences. After considering various options, Brian and Denise chose to stage a boating accident. They planned the murder to coincide with the maximum payout on Mike's life insurance policy, which was set to expire at the end of December 2000. The plan was in place. Brian invited Mike on a hunting trip, claiming he'd found an ideal spot on Lake Semol's shores. Mike thought he'd be back home by noon to celebrate his anniversary with his wife. Brian told him to bring his wading boots, as they were essential for the trip. Unbeknownst to Mike, Brian had a sinister motive. If he fell overboard wearing wading boots, he'd supposedly drown quickly. The plan was to make Mike's death appear as an accidental drowning. Once they were in the water, Brian pushed Mike out of the boat. However, Mike grabbed onto nearby stumps and started wading through the water towards the shore. Brian panicked, not knowing how to react. Mike began shouting for help, and Brian, desperate and confused, grabbed a shotgun and shot Mike in the head without thinking of the consequences. Brian's plan had unraveled, and he had to cover his tracks. Time was running out. He should have been home by now, getting ready to go hunting with his father-in-law. Since no one knew he was at the lake with Mike, Brian decided to drive home and pretend he'd overslept. He hoped Kathy would still be asleep. Brian entered the house as quietly as possible. Kathy was asleep, and his phone was on the floor. He went to bed, then called his father-in-law to apologize. Next, Brian created an alibi for himself before hiding the body. Denise was unaware that Brian had shot Mike in the head and buried him. Brian tried to confess, but Denise didn't want to hear it. For her, it was enough that her husband was gone. She preferred to believe that God had prevented Mike from swimming out and let him drown, as Brian had suggested. They promised each other to keep the secret. Denise and Brian rationalized the killing, claiming that Mike's presence made it impossible for them to live together. They downplayed the role of money, saying it was just an added bonus. Brian testified in court that investigators had discovered he had planted a hat, boots, flashlight, and license as part of a ruse. His aim was twofold. First, to deter searchers from abandoning the lake, and later, to provide justification for declaring Mike dead, thereby allowing Denise to collect insurance benefits. Impressively, they managed to expedite the typically 5-year recognition process to just 7 months, securing not only Social Security benefits, but also other advantages. As a result, Denise received approximately $2 million on May 8, 2018. Denise Williams faced charges of first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and being an accessory to a felony, all of which carried a life sentence. Despite pleading not guilty to all 3 charges, Denise was sentenced to life imprisonment in February 2019. 5 months later, Mike and Denise's daughter Ansley inherited all of her late father's assets and the insurance money that had been owed to Denise. Denise Williams appealed her conviction and life sentence. Her attorney argued before Florida's First District Court of Appeal that there was no evidence to implicate her in the actual murder. In November 2020, the murder conviction was overturned, although the 30-year sentence for conspiracy to commit murder was upheld. Denise is currently being held at the Florida Women's Reception Center and will be 78 years old upon her release. Brian Winchester is currently serving the remainder of his sentence at Madison Correctional Institute in Florida, with a scheduled release date of July 30th, 2036, at which point he will be 67 years old. Ansley, the daughter of Mike and Denise, firmly believes her mother is innocent and attributes responsibility to Brian Winchester. While refusing to discuss the case or her personal life with the media, Ansley remains estranged from her uncle, Nick, and grandmother, Cheryl, who are distressed by their inability to connect with her. Cheryl deeply regrets having lost both her son and her granddaughter. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Stern. Sarah Elizabeth Sarah was born on March 24, 1997, in Neptune City, New Jersey, to Michael and Susan Sarah. As their only child, Sarah received all the love and attention from her parents, who had been unable to have more children due to health issues. Sarah grew up to be a lively, cheerful, and outgoing child. She was involved in various activities, including school theater, photography, drawing, swimming, and softball. Her passion was art, and she aspired to become an artist or designer. After graduating from high school, Sarah enrolled in a local college to pursue her dream. Tragedy struck in the autumn of 2013 when Sarah's mother, Susan, passed away after a long battle with cancer. Despite periods of remission, the disease ultimately took its toll. This devastating loss was a tremendous shock to the family, particularly for Sarah, who was extremely close to her mother. After a period of struggling with depression, Sarah began to support her ailing father and care for their beloved dog, Buddy. As time passed, her life started to improve, and she set goals for the future. Upon graduating from college, Sarah planned to apply to a prestigious university in New York. Before pursuing further education, she hoped to travel the world, with a particular interest in visiting Canada and possibly even living there for a while. Her father, Michael Sarah, frequently traveled out of state for work, often for weeks at a time. However, he never worried about leaving Sarah alone, as she was a grown and independent young woman, and their town was considered safe. But on the night of December 3, 2016, around 2:30 a.m., an unsettling incident occurred. A concerned citizen reported an abandoned vehicle on the Belmar Bridge along Highway 35, prompting the police to become involved. The area was usually deserted at night, which made the lone, empty vehicle stand out. A taxi driver, who was taking a shortcut home across the old bridge on the outskirts, noticed the car parked on the side of the road. He stopped to see if anyone needed assistance, but found the vehicle empty with no one around. Concerned that the driver might have jumped into the water below, a tragic occurrence that had happened before in this spot, the taxi driver called the police. Police officers responding to the scene found the car's keys in the ignition and no signs of blood or struggle, leading them to initially believe that the owner may have intentionally left the car on the bridge to jump into the river. To investigate further, they checked the car's ownership and discovered it belonged to 85-year-old Lily Sarah, who lived in a nearby town. When officers visited Lily's home, they found her alive and well. She explained that she hadn't driven the car in years due to poor eyesight, and her 19-year-old granddaughter, Sarah, was the frequent driver. Lily tried to contact Sarah but was unable to reach her because her phone was turned off. She then provided the officers with her son's address, where Sarah lived, and informed them that Sarah was likely alone, as her father was out of town for work and wouldn't return until the following week. Sarah was nowhere to be found at her home. Although the back door was open, an initial search of the house didn't turn up any signs of foul play. However, they did find the family dog locked in one of the bedrooms, whining. Despite the open back door, there were no signs of disarray or struggle, and no evidence of an intruder. As the news of her disappearance spread, Sarah's father, Michael, rushed back home on the next available flight. Upon his arrival, he confirmed that everything was still in its place and nothing was missing. Notably, all of Sarah's personal belongings, including her passport, driver's license, and mobile phone, were still at the house. The police shared their initial concerns with Michael, suggesting that Sarah might have gone to the nearby bridge with intentions to harm herself. They asked if he had noticed any warning signs of suicidal tendencies or self-harm. Michael revealed that Sarah had struggled with depression after her mother's passing, but had made a full recovery with the help of loved ones and her studies. In fact, Sarah had big plans for her future, aspiring to become a designer and travel the world. To piece together what happened, the police needed to know who Sarah had contact with on the day she vanished, what conversations she had, and who saw her last. The first witnesses to come forward revealed that Sarah had spent most of December 2nd with her childhood friend, Liam McAtasney. As the last person to see her, Liam was a crucial part of the investigation. The police quickly decided to speak with him to gather more information and reconstruct the events of that day. When the police arrived at the McAtasney residence, they met with Liam's mother, who told them that her son was sleeping after a night shift. The officers asked her to wake Liam, who seemed confused about the situation. Once he was informed about Sarah's disappearance, Liam confirmed that they had spent the previous day together and agreed to go to the police station to give a statement. Liam shared that he and Sarah had attended college classes together that morning, but they decided to skip the last 2 lectures and go to her place to unwind instead. At her house, they played video games, chatted about their plans, and socialized. They briefly left her house twice to pick up food and visit a local supermarket. Liam left Sarah's house around 7 p.m. to go to his night shift job and did not see her again. Liam was also asked if Sarah had been struggling with any mental health issues. He explained that she had been battling deep depression since her mother passed away. He shared that Sarah often felt hopeless, wanting to escape or end her life, but he did not think that this meant she was planning to harm herself. He noted that she also struggled to connect with her father, leading to additional emotional strain. Liam considered it possible that Sarah's emotional state may have contributed to her disappearance. However, it was also clear that Sarah was planning a trip to Canada around that time and had recently exchanged money in preparation for her travels. Liam's testimony gained credibility when Canadian dollars were found in her bedside table drawer, though the amount was relatively insignificant. Preston Taylor, a close friend from high school, corroborated Liam's story. Preston mentioned that Sarah had struggled with depression, leading him to wonder if she had fled to Canada or taken her own life by jumping off a bridge. His emotional testimony underscored the strong bond he shared with Sarah. Despite these accounts, investigators soon ruled out the possibility of Sarah fleeing the country due to the absence of her passport. As a result, the search focused on the more distressing possibility of her having jumped to her death. A comprehensive search operation was launched along the river, involving divers, specialized equipment, and hundreds of volunteers, including police. However, Strong currents posed a challenge, potentially carrying her remains or personal belongings far from the bridge, and thorough searches of both riverbanks were necessary to try to find any signs of Sarah. Among the volunteers searching for Sarah were her friends Liam and Preston. Despite their efforts, the search yielded nothing, prompting law enforcement to re-question those closest to Sarah. It was during this process that discrepancies in their accounts began to emerge. Sarah's friends and classmates described her as a happy and carefree person, with no signs of depression or problems with her father, whom she often spoke about affectionately. However, Liam and Preston's behavior after Sarah's disappearance raised eyebrows. They initially acted as if they had lost a loved one, gaining sympathy from many. But over time, their behavior seemed increasingly insincere, as if they were performing for an audience. The fact that Liam and Preston had only recently become close, about a month before Sarah's disappearance, raised suspicions and led the police to re-question them. Liam was visibly shaken when he was brought in for further questioning. The investigator asked him about his relationship with Sarah and Preston, and Liam explained that the three of them had grown up together on the same street and attended the same school. They were extremely close, sharing their deepest secrets and dreams with each other. Preston had even taken Sarah to prom, but they had never been romantically involved. Liam clarified that his relationship with Sarah was more than just friendship, he considered her like a sister. They had even listed each other as siblings on social media. Sarah had confided in Liam about her family, telling him that her mother had left her a significant amount of money in a safety deposit box at the bank. Sarah didn't trust her father, who claimed a right to the money, so she planned to retrieve it soon and move to Canada. However, when the investigator shared this information with Michael, Sarah's father, he provided a conflicting account. According to Michael, his wife had been saving money for Sarah's future since her birth, setting aside funds for education, a wedding, or a down payment on a house. The money had been stored at home in a shoebox, containing old and worn-out bills, but no one had thought much of it at the time. After Sarah's mother passed away, her father gave her a large sum of money, which he advised her to put in the bank. Sarah took his advice, dividing the money between her checking account for everyday expenses and a safe deposit box for the rest. She intended to use the money for graduate school and travel. Michael claimed he wasn't interested in the money for himself. When investigators discovered that Sarah had access to a significant amount of money, they began to suspect that her disappearance might be related to her finances. They decided to look into her financial transactions, including her bank account and safe deposit box. Their investigation revealed that Sarah had withdrawn a large amount of cash from an ATM just a few days before she disappeared, and had also accessed her safe deposit box at the bank around the same time. The detectives were in for another surprise when they reviewed the bank surveillance footage, which showed that Sarah was not alone when she visited the bank on December 1st. Liam was with her, raising questions about why he hadn't mentioned this earlier. When asked about it, Liam explained that Sarah had confided in him about her banking activities and had asked for his accompaniment because she was nervous about carrying a large sum of cash. Liam's hesitation was evident, but his story seemed plausible, and his demeanor appeared genuine. Further investigation led to the discovery of a security camera in a neighboring house that had captured footage of the street and Sarah's yard. The footage confirmed that Liam had stayed at Sarah's house until 7 p.m., then left for work and didn't return. Meanwhile, the silver sedan was seen leaving the garage around 11 p.m. This new information added a chilling twist to the already disturbing case. In a surprising turn of events, an acquaintance of Sarah's named Anthony walked into the police station about a month after her disappearance. Unaware of the recent events, Anthony had been out of town for several weeks. He shared a peculiar story that sent shockwaves through the investigation. It turned out that Anthony had gone to school with Sarah, Liam, and Preston, and after graduation, he had pursued a passion for filmmaking, keeping in touch only with Liam, who also shared his interest in cinema. Anthony remembered that about a month and a half before Sarah disappeared, Liam visited him and they spent an evening brainstorming ideas for a horror movie aimed at teenagers. Liam came up with a plot about a girl who shares a secret about a large sum of money with her friend, who then gains her trust and kills her, dumping her body in a river. Anthony thought the idea was good, and they even wrote a few pages of the script. After that, Anthony moved on to another project and forgot about the story. He then left town to work on a film as a camera assistant. When he returned, Liam unexpectedly called him and asked if the police had contacted Anthony. Anthony was surprised and had not heard that Sarah was missing, so he decided to go to the police. After hearing a new witness's testimony, the police asked Anthony to try to get Liam to confess by drawing him into a conversation. Anthony agreed and a plan was set in motion. He would invite Liam to work on a project that required renting expensive camera equipment, which they would pretend they couldn't afford. Liam had ambitions of being in a movie, so the police thought he would likely jump at the chance to make his dream a reality, especially if it meant using the money he had taken from Sarah. They decided to test him by setting up a sting operation. Anthony, a friend of Liam's, was asked to pretend to have connections in the film industry and offer him a deal. Anthony met with Liam and suggested they discuss the details in person. Unbeknownst to Liam, a hidden camera had been installed in Anthony's car to capture any incriminating evidence. When Liam got into the car, he looked around nervously, as if he suspected something was off. He then handed Anthony an envelope containing $2,000 in cash and asked if it was enough to rent the equipment they would need for the movie. Anthony agreed, and then asked Liam where he had gotten the old bills. Liam hesitated before admitting that the money belonged to Sarah, and that he and his friend Preston had taken it from her house because, in his words, the dead don't need it. Although Liam didn't provide any further details, his admission was enough for the police to arrest him and his friend Preston on suspicion of a crime. Preston, Liam's accomplice, quickly began cooperating with the authorities and struck a deal with the prosecution. He told them that he hadn't directly participated in the crime, but had helped Liam cover his tracks and get rid of Sarah's body. According to Preston, Liam started plotting to take Sarah's money as soon as he found out about it. Sarah had kept her inheritance a secret, even from her closest friend, for a long time. However, when she began making serious plans for a trip to Canada, Liam asked her how she intended to pay for it, and she revealed that she had inherited a sum of money from her mother. Liam then persuaded her that it would be safer to store the money in a home safe rather than a bank vault, and he urged her to withdraw the cash. Liam, determined to carry out his plan, waited for the perfect opportunity while Sarah's father was away on a business trip. He enlisted the help of his friend Preston, promising him $25,000 in exchange for his assistance. Liam had Sarah withdraw a large sum of money from the ATM, but didn't check the exact amount. They spent the next day together, waiting for the right moment to strike. When the time came, Liam separated Sarah from her dog by locking it in another room, then approached Sarah from behind and attempted to strangle her. However, the crime proved more difficult than Liam anticipated. Sarah, being physically strong and athletic, resisted fiercely, resulting in an intense struggle until she eventually lost consciousness. But despite his best efforts, Liam was unable to determine whether she had truly succumbed. Sarah continued to show signs of life, leaving Liam to prolong his efforts to ensure her demise. This took nearly 30 minutes. Only when Liam was certain Sarah was dead did he leave her house, going about his normal routine by heading to work. He then had Preston follow up on his original instructions, no doubt aiming to ensure their sinister act would go unnoticed. Liam McAtasney snuck into Sarah's house through the back door, avoiding the camera's view, and dragged the body to the garage. He then cleaned up the room to remove any evidence. A couple of hours later, he returned to the house, took a small safe from Sarah's room, and placed the body in the car. Liam drove away carefully to avoid being caught on the neighbor's camera. He met Preston at a bridge, where they transferred the body to Preston's car and then disposed of it in a nearby river. After disposing of the body, they cleaned the car and drove back to Liam's house to divide the stolen money. However, they were disappointed to find only $110,000 in the safe. They decided to be cautious and not spend the old bills immediately to avoid raising suspicion. Preston buried the safe in a local park, and they only spent the money Sarah had withdrawn from her account. During the trial, Preston confessed to the crime, but Liam denied any involvement and tried to shift the blame to his friend. Liam's lawyer also claimed his client was innocent, suggesting that Preston acted alone. The case was complicated by the fact that Sarah's body was never found. When police searched Liam's house, they found a small key that fit the buried safe, which was identified by Preston as evidence of Liam's guilt. The trial of Liam McAtasney lasted over 2 years. Despite the fact that Sarah Stern's body was never found, the evidence presented in court proved McAtasney's guilt. This evidence included a script he had written months before the crime, a key to a safe found in his home, incriminating statements he made in the car, and old bills he had given to someone. Furthermore, fingerprints belonging to Liam and his accomplice, Preston Taylor, were found inside the safe. A co-worker of Liam's also testified that he had been absent from work for a few hours on the night of the crime and had asked someone to cover for him. As a result of the trial, Liam was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Preston, who had not directly participated in the crime, received an 18-year sentence for obstructing justice and hindering the investigation. Preston will be eligible for parole in 15 years. Unfortunately, Sarah Stern's body has still not been found. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carmen Thomas. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30th, 1987, in South Africa. Her life took a drastic turn when her father passed away when she was just 10 years old. Overwhelmed by grief, her family moved to live with relatives in Whitby, United Kingdom. However, the move did not bring the peace they had hoped for, and they eventually returned to South Africa. When Carmen turned 18, she decided to leave behind with her relatives and later relocated to London to pursue her education. She earned a master's degree in marketing and quickly became known for her charismatic and outgoing personality. Carmen formed strong bonds with many people and became a loyal friend and companion. However, living in a big city like London came with its expenses, and Carmen had to work hard to maintain a decent standard of living. By day, she worked as a marketer in a store, and by night, she worked part-time at a gentleman's club. Although her career choices may have raised eyebrows, Carmen was a woman of principle and never compromised her values. She conducted herself with dignity and earned the respect of her clients. It was during her time at the club that she met Brad Callahan, a charming and flamboyant man. Brad was born in April 1978 in New Zealand to parents who separated when he was just 9 years old. He stayed with his mother and later moved to Australia. Brad graduated from university in 2001 with a degree in construction engineering. He was then offered a job as a chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK by a prominent construction company. To navigate the complex's high-stakes negotiations and enhance his professional status, Brad sought the services of a gentleman's agency, where he met Carmen. She was intelligent, tall, and beautiful, with striking dark eyes and black hair. However, Brad's demanding career and ambitious nature left him little time for a serious relationship. Despite this, Brad and Carmen got along well after a dinner, and their casual interactions eventually blossomed into a solid friendship. Over time, their friendship deepened into a romance, and they began living together. Their relationship was built on mutual trust, care, and support. When Carmen got pregnant, Brad decided it would be better to go back to New Zealand, a country with cleaner air and a more laid-back lifestyle. In March 2005, they returned to Auckland. After the birth of their son Jack, they experienced immense happiness. They prioritized Jack's safety and well-being, making sure he had everything he needed for a happy childhood. However, the arrival of their son brought significant challenges to their relationship. The first problems arose in the relationship between Carmen and Brad due to disagreements on how to raise their child, causing tension and instability. After 3 years, they decided to go their separate ways, but shared joint custody of their son, Jack. The breakup was challenging for both, but they made a genuine effort to maintain a positive relationship for Jack's sake. Carmen and Jack eventually moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, who also lived in Oakland. With time, Carmen regained her emotional balance and started a new life without Brad. In 2008, she and her son relocated to a house on a street near Brad's, so Jack could be close to his father. Having lost her own father at a young age, Carmen wanted to ensure Jack always had a father figure in his life. Despite her decision to live near Brad, Carmen's friends and family believed she and Brad still had a good friendship, but in reality, they only spent time together when it was related to Jack. As time passed, life continued for Carmen. After parting ways, Carmen and Brad each attempted to move on. Brad resumed his career as a construction engineer and, in May 2009, began a new relationship, which ultimately led to an engagement. Meanwhile, Carmen devoted herself to raising their son and, much to Brad's dismay, returned to her work at a gentleman's club. This choice troubled Brad. Carmen repeatedly presented Brad with ultimatums, but he dismissed her requests, focusing on his impending marriage and plans for fatherhood once again. This marked the beginning of adjustments to his financial commitments, specifically affecting the alimony payments for the maintenance of their son, Jack, which Brad made in accordance with their agreement. However, Carmen viewed the financial constraints as a catalyst in an escalating series of conflicts. Tensions escalated until March 19, 2010, when a domestic violence incident occurred. Police responded to a neighbor's call about a dispute and mediated the situation. As a result, Carmen received a formal warning from law enforcement. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Carmen's house to discuss a new school for Jack and to sign a written agreement for child support. However, Carmen was unhappy with the document and asked Brad to leave, yelling that Jack was not his son as he departed. 2 weeks later, Brad tried to contact Carmen again, but she did not respond. On July 13, 2010, Brad reported Carmen missing to the police, who began searching for her. Through video footage and interviews with neighbors, investigators were able to reconstruct a timeline of events leading up to Carmen's disappearance. They discovered that on June 29, a surveillance camera at a nearby supermarket had captured footage of Carmen, providing a potential lead in the search. During their investigation of the rented house where Carmen and Jack lived, police noticed that there was no outdoor garbage can. Inside the house, they found bloodstains on the front door, washing machine, sink, and shower. To confirm the presence of blood, forensic scientists used luminol, a substance that reacts with the iron in hemoglobin. The test revealed multiple patterns of blood on the bathroom door and floor. The landlord reported that on June 29, she heard loud screaming, followed by prolonged crying and moaning. When she knocked on Carmen's door, no one answered. She looked out the window and saw a street trash can and an overturned drying rack, which caught her attention. She called her husband, but before he arrived, Brad walked out of the house, carrying soiled clothes. He told the landlord that Carmen had become ill after a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlord noticed that Brad appeared to have just taken a shower. She had no reason to doubt his story, so she didn't call the police. The search for Carmen continued, and her cell phone activity caught the police's attention. Although messages were being sent from her phone regularly, the tone and language used were unusual and didn't match her previous communication style. The outgoing messages and calls continued until July 10th. During further investigation, Carmen's car was found, and in the back seat, they discovered her luggage, clothes, and other personal belongings. The police investigation into Carmen's disappearance began with the examination of her seized suitcase, which revealed traces of blood and a note indicating she owed money to her employer. An envelope with Misty's name and $270 was also found in the glove compartment. Inspector Mark Benefield suspected foul play after finding blood in the car and launched a search for Carmen's body in the countryside southeast of Auckland, but it was inconclusive. As the investigation continued, police analyzed Carmen's and Brad's phones, discovering they had been in close proximity to each other during the search. However, Carmen's phone was not connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. A crucial piece of evidence was a missing trash can, which had disappeared from its usual spot near the house on the day Carmen vanished. A neighbor reported seeing the can being taken away through her window. Police suspected the trash can might have been used to dispose of evidence. When EE examined Brad's phone records and bank card details, then they found that on June 30th, Brad had purchased a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and several garbage bags, which raised suspicions. By studying Brad's daily routine, police identified some unusual events, including a day when he arrived early at the construction site and walked alone around the property for an extended period. While it was not unusual for a supervisor to be on site early, the police found it noteworthy. After gathering evidence, including Carmen's cell phone and suspicious purchases, they began to suspect Brad of murder. They believed Brad had killed his former lover, Carmen Thomas, by hitting her multiple times in the head and then carefully hiding her body. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with Carmen's murder and attempting to obstruct justice. Brad's second son was born while he was in custody, causing him to become emotional and resentful. 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators the location of Carmen's body. It turned out that Brad had attempted to create an alibi by making it seem like Carmen had left for Hamilton and never returned. However, under questioning, he eventually detailed the events of the day Carmen was killed, revealing that his plan had not been as perfect as he thought. Brad admitted that Carmen and Brad had a heated argument, which ended with Carmen telling Brad that Jack was not his son. In a fit of rage, Carmen kicked Brad out of the house. However, he returned 5 minutes later, grabbed a baseball bat, and brutally attacked Carmen, striking her in the head with such force that she fell unconscious, bleeding profusely. Despite realizing the gravity of his actions, Brad continued to assault Carmen, throwing several punches. Memories of happier times flashed before his eyes, but his anger and resentment consumed him. Brad knew his life would never be the same after this moment, and he could never undo the damage. Nevertheless, he felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, believing that he had solved his problem and ensured that Jack was now his alone. Brad regained his composure, took a shower, and quietly left Carmen's house. In the following days, he devised a plan to dispose of Carmen's body and cover up the crime. He met his friend outside a supermarket and asked him to buy black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning products, hoping to avoid raising suspicion. Brad then returned to the apartment, meticulously cleaned up the bloodstains, wrapped Carmen's body in a bag, and disposed of it in a trash can. After killing Carmen, Brad dismembered her body into 8 pieces to make it easier to dispose of. He cut off her legs at the hip joints and then cut each leg in half at the knee. He also severed her arms and head from her torso. A few days later, on July 3rd, Brad met a friend at a boat ramp in Okahu Bay, near downtown Oakland. He confessed to his friend that he had killed Carmen during an argument and asked for help disposing of her body. However, his friend refused to provide a boat to dump the remains into the sea. Over the next few days, Brad drove to Ware Ridge in West Auckland and buried the dismembered body parts in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot. He left a suitcase of clothes and some of her personal belongings in the car to make it seem like she had left voluntarily. However, he made a critical mistake by including bloody clothes in the suitcase. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Brad started sending text messages from Carmen's cell phone to her friends, pretending to be her. He claimed that she was not feeling well and had been in bad shape for days. However, this plan ultimately backfired on him. On October 1st, police excavated the burial site indicated by Brad and found the body of Carmen Thomas. Her remains were discovered in plastic containers, carefully removed from a makeshift grave on Wayfair Ridge. An autopsy revealed that Carmen Thomas had died from multiple blows to the head, with the fatal blow causing a compressed skull fracture. After multiple forensic examinations, Carmen's body was released to her family on October 13th. Tragically, her young son Jack, who had been waiting and hoping to see his mother again, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket. On February 8, 2011, Brad Callahan's first court hearing was held. Judge Winning determined that the crime was unintentional and took into account Brad's claim that he acted impulsively in a state of rage. However, the judge was more severe in his assessment of the subsequent cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was charged with attempting to change the course of justice. A retrial was held on November 25, 2011, where police officers filled the High Court in Auckland. In a surprise move, Brad Callahan made 2 guilty pleas, admitting to murder and attempting to change the course of justice after Carmen's death. A judge has sentenced 31-year-old Brad Callahan to life in prison for murdering Carmen Thomas. Brad was also given a 6-year sentence for attempting to interfere with the investigation into Thomas's death. The judge considered this one of the most serious cases of attempted interference with justice, describing Brad's actions as extremely serious. During the trial at Auckland High Court, the judge criticized the brutality of Thomas's murder, but decided not to impose the harshest possible sentence. The courtroom was filled with Thomas's friends and family, including her parents who had traveled from South Africa. Judge Venin condemned Brad's attempts to cover up his crime, which involved considerable effort and deception. The 6-year sentence for interfering with the investigation will be served at the same time as the life sentence. In a statement, the Thomas family expressed their ongoing anger and grief, saying that no punishment can bring their daughter back. However, they are relieved that Brad will be in prison for a long time, giving him the opportunity to reflect on the harm he has caused. Little boy Jack Brad is living with his grandmother in another town under an assumed name. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Adam Strong. Adam Strong was born in 1972 in Cornwall, a small town in Stormont County, Ontario. Little is known about his family and early life. He remained single and childless, working as a gas station attendant and a security guard on film sets. Those who knew him described Adam as quirky and eccentric, often coming across as superior to others. He enjoyed debating and arguing to prove his point, but was not typically confrontational. A review of his social media profiles revealed Adam's interest in BDSM practices, which he openly discussed and shared photos and videos about. Although he never had a long-term partner, some former partners accused him of being a sadist who subjected them to physical and emotional abuse, leading to the end of their relationships. Adam also had a peculiar hobby of writing reviews of adult films and magazines. It appeared that watching such content was a significant part of his free time. Despite his unusual interests, Adam presented himself as a calm and composed individual, showing no outward signs of a troubled or criminal nature. The story took an unexpected turn 4 months later when at the end of December, when David Wood's family moved into the house at 19 Macmillan Drive in Oshawa, they were immediately struck by a strange and unpleasant smell. Their downstairs neighbor, Adam Strong, a 45-year-old single man who lived in the other half of the house, reassured them that it was just a minor plumbing issue that he would fix within a few days. Although Adam was friendly and polite in his communication, there was something unsettling about him that put the Wood family on edge. When David's wife tried to welcome him with some homemade cookies, Adam wouldn't even let her into his apartment. Instead, he stepped out into the hallway, closing his door behind him. In that brief moment, David's wife caught a glimpse of Adam's living space, which was in disarray, and the smell inside was overpowering and foul. Adam borrowed cookies from his new neighbor and quickly left. Later, when they met in the yard, he apologized for not inviting her in, explaining that his apartment was a mess due to upcoming renovations. Despite his efforts to be polite, he seemed nervous. As the Wood family settled into their new home, they tried to ignore a persistent smell. However, on December 29th, they called a plumber to fix a sewer blockage, which had intensified the stench. The problem seemed minor, but what the workers found in the pipes shocked even experienced forensic experts. Plumber Sean Funn and his partner began to clear the blockage in the Woods' apartment. Although they were accustomed to unpleasant odors, they were surprised by the terrible smell inside. They soon realized they needed to investigate further and descended to the apartment below, which belonged to a man named Adam. Adam reluctantly let the workers in, apologizing for the mess. The smell was even worse in his apartment, and when the plumbers reached the source of the blockage, the stench became unbearable. Sean, a seasoned plumber, had never encountered anything as foul-smelling as this in his years of practice. However, an even more disturbing discovery awaited him and his team when they decided to clear the pipe. Adam, already on edge, became increasingly agitated, refusing to step away and bombarding the workers with questions about their methods and estimated time of completion. He later claimed he was simply curious, having never witnessed this process before. The specialists tried to brush off his behavior, but their efforts were soon overshadowed by the gruesome discovery of over 10 kilograms of flesh, hair, and bone fragments in the pipes. Sean was horrified to find disfigured and partially decomposed human fingers among the debris. Adam feigned surprise, claiming he had never seen anything so disgusting, and then asked the plumbers if they had any idea how this could have ended up in the sewer pipe. Sean decided to call the police immediately to report the disturbing discovery. He informed them that he had likely found human remains and provided the address. He made sure Adam didn't touch or disturb anything, preserving the evidence. When the officers arrived, they quickly confirmed that Sean's suspicions were correct. Human flesh had been extracted from the pipes. The police then spoke with the Adam. He admitted that a woman's body had been stuck in the pipe. He even revealed that other body parts were stored in his refrigerator's freezer. Upon investigation, the police found a severed head and limb fragments packed in plastic bags, which were too large. The house was extremely filthy and cluttered, with a kitchen filled with dirty dishes and rotting food, as well as trash covering the floor. Empty pizza boxes were scattered around, and numerous magazines of an explicit and masochistic nature were present among the mess. Various adult toys, gags, whips, handcuffs, and restraint devices were also discovered. Adam Strong was arrested at the scene and taken to the police station for questioning. His arrest puzzled the authorities, as he had no prior run-ins with the law and was not a person of interest to the police. Mr. Adam had resided at 19 Macmillan Drive in Oshawa for over 10 years, dating back to 2007, without incident or complaints from neighbors. The House of Horrors at 19 Macmillan Drive, Adam's residence, was secured and guarded as a crime scene. An initial inspection revealed a complex and time-consuming process lay ahead, with investigators expecting to uncover more shocking evidence. The discovery of a head in the refrigerator was just the beginning. Evidence found at the scene led law enforcement to suspect a connection to Rory Hash, whose torso had been recovered from a body of water 4 months earlier. A tattoo on the neck and subsequent DNA analysis confirmed that the discovered remains belonged to Rory. Further investigation revealed blood-stained clothing and shoes belonging to she, hidden among trash in various rooms of the house. The bedroom was particularly disturbing, with blood traces found on the bed, walls, furniture, and ceiling. These bloodstains were later confirmed to belong to a missing schoolgirl. A dissection table was also found in the kitchen, suggesting it was used to dismember and gut the victim. The entire scene was gruesome, with blood, skin particles, hair, and bone fragments scattered everywhere, causing nausea in those who witnessed it. The bathroom was extremely dirty and unsanitary, with signs of a violent crime visible everywhere, including dirt, blood, and broken fixtures. The toilet was dismantled and lay in a corner, surrounded by garbage. It appeared that the perpetrator, Adam, had attempted to dispose of a body by cutting it into pieces and flushing them down the sewer. However, he encountered a blockage and, when his attempt to fix it failed, left the scene in disarray. Inside the house, a large number of sharp objects were discovered, which likely had been used to dismember the victim. Some of the objects, including knives, still had blood on them. Further analysis of the evidence, including DNA samples, revealed that Adam had semen on fragments of the victim's body, which had been found in the refrigerator. Rory Hash was born on July 9, 1999, in Oshawa, Ontario, to Shannon Dion, a single mother. Rory's father was not present in her life, having left before her birth. Despite this, Rory grew up in a loving and supportive family environment provided by her mother and maternal grandmother. Rory's family had an unconventional background, with her maternal grandfather founding and leading the motorcycle club Satan's Choice. He was also a skilled boxer with connections to organized crime. Additionally, Rory's uncle was a member of the Hells Angels motorcycle club and led a troubled life, frequently encountering legal issues. However, this did not affect Rory's childhood, which was remarkably peaceful and carefree. Rory excelled academically and had a passion for dance, winning awards in competitions. Those who knew her described her as intelligent, responsible, and compassionate. At the age of 13, Rory earned top honors as a cadet in her local army unit, showcasing her exceptional qualities from a young age. At 15, Rory's life took a downward turn. A friend introduced her to drugs, and she quickly became addicted. She started spending time with the wrong crowd, neglected her schoolwork, and eventually stopped attending school altogether. For about a year, her family tried to help her overcome her addiction by sending her to various treatment centers, but she relapsed each time. At 17, Rory ran away from home and began working in the sex trade to support her habit. Rory eventually sought help from a specialized service for teenagers struggling with addiction. With their support, she was able to enter mandatory treatment and turn her life around. She found a job at a local shop, studied remotely to earn her high school diploma, and even started thinking about attending college. Rory also started a serious relationship with a boy named Anthony, and they decided to move in together in the spring of 2017. When Rory discovered she was pregnant, she was nearly 18 and felt ready to take on the responsibility of motherhood. Her mother supported her decision, but was unaware that Rory had started using illicit substances again. In mid-August, Rory met with Crane at a shopping center. Crane had been keeping an eye on her for 18 months to ensure she didn't fall back into her old habits. During their meeting, Rory revealed that she had started using drugs again and had lost her job a month prior. She also admitted to exchanging intimate favors for money or drugs. Crane was deeply concerned and promised to help. He asked Rory to wait while he made a call to arrange for her to be hospitalized. However, when he returned, Rory was gone. The next day, Rory's mother and uncle took her to the hospital after finding her in a state of incoherence due to substance use. They left her in the emergency room queue for about an hour, but when they returned, Rory was nowhere to be found. Security footage showed that she had simply gotten up and walked out of the hospital. Her family reported her missing the following day, but despite a thorough search and widespread social media attention, Rory was never seen again. Rory's exact circumstances of arrival at Adam's house are unknown, but it is probable that she went there seeking drugs in exchange for sex. The investigation started when Adam informed the police about the location of Rory's remaining body parts. Initially, investigators anticipated Adam would admit to the crime, but when he was taken to the station, he became uncooperative, refused to answer questions, and denied any involvement in Rory's death, all while remaining calm. The only charge filed against Adam was desecration of a body, as there was not enough direct evidence to link him to the murder. Despite his lawyer's efforts, Adam was not granted bail and stayed in jail until his trial. Investigators attempted to get Adam to reveal more information by provoking an emotional response, but he remained cautious and avoided discussing Rory's visit to his house and his potential involvement in her death. However, Adam freely talked about his interest in bladed weapons and his large collection of knives. A search of Adam's house uncovered a significant piece of evidence, a dirty hunting knife hidden in a closet with dried skin fragments that appeared to be human. DNA testing revealed that the samples on the knife did not match Rory's, but belonged to someone else. It took several months to identify the person, but by July 2017, investigators had confirmed that the DNA on the knife belonged to Candace Fitzpatrick, she who had gone missing about 10 years earlier. Candace shared many similarities with Rory Hash. Both struggled with addiction and had run-ins with the law. They came from troubled families and often ran away from home, sometimes disappearing for months at a time. To survive, they would often exchange sex for food and other necessities. Candace was born in 1989 and was 18 when she disappeared. Her family did not realize she was missing until almost 2 years later, by which time any potential leads had gone cold. Many people believed that Candace's lifestyle and social circle meant she could have gone anywhere. For 10 years, her parents thought she might have run away and would eventually return home. However, news from law enforcement in 2018 destroyed their hope of ever seeing their daughter alive again. A striking feature of the case was the physical resemblance between Candace and another victim, who was the same age. The police believed they had caught a serial offender. The suspect, Adam, also confessed to harming Candace. However, Adam refused to provide information about Rory unless the police agreed to improve his prison conditions. He wanted a private cell, a large TV, internet, and his favorite meals. Although law enforcement was outraged by Adam's demands, they agreed in order to gain valuable information. Adam began by sharing his troubled childhood, revealing that he was abused by his stepfather from age 5 and started harming animals at age 7, deriving physical pleasure from these acts. He also discussed his unusual intimate preferences and expressed frustration at not finding a partner who shared these interests. When discussing Rory, Adam described in detail how he had dismembered her, seemingly taking pleasure in the act, but later regretted his plumbing had failed him. However, when questioned by police, Adam denied responsibility for her death, claiming she had died from an overdose and he had only disposed of the body. When asked about Candace, a case from 10 years prior, Adam was caught off guard and attempted to learn how the police had discovered the connection. Upon hearing about the human remains found on an old knife, Adam became subdued and regretted not taking better precautions to avoid detection. He admitted to meeting Candace but denied killing her. Despite a lack of evidence to support his claims, Adam unintentionally incriminated himself during the investigation. In an attempt to gain sympathy, he shared his account of events. However, when informed that the victim, Rory, was pregnant at the time of her death, Adam strongly denied this fact. The police noted that the pregnancy was in its early stages, and therefore not visibly apparent. Adam claimed that he would have noticed if she was pregnant, sparking a realization among the investigators that he would stop at nothing to argue his point. To uncover more information, the police told Adam that Rory was pregnant, which led him to attempt to prove the contrary. In his eagerness to refute this, he shared graphic details about how he had personally examined her body and held her reproductive organs in his hands. Adam's account was detailed and included his physical sensations, describing the flesh as soft and warm. At one point, he even mentioned feeling a pulse. These statements raised suspicions that Rory may have still been alive at the time. Unfortunately for Adam, his entire narrative was captured on camera, and his incriminating statements were presented as evidence in court. When confronted about his earlier statements, Adam tried to retract his previous admissions, but it was too late. The defendant, Adam Strong, refused to reveal what he had done with Candace's body, and despite extensive searches, her remains were never found. Investigators also failed to identify any other potential victims. During one of the final interrogations, Strong showed no remorse, saying, "I don't know if it matters, but I'd like to extend my condolences to her parents." During the trial, Strong's lawyers argued that he was mentally ill and therefore not responsible for his actions, claiming he needed medical treatment rather than punishment. However, the court had to decide whether he was sane and accountable for his crimes or if he should be committed to a psychiatric facility instead of serving time in prison. A psychiatric evaluation found that although Strong had certain mental health disorders, he was aware of his actions and could be held legally responsible. Strong's trial began in September 2020, 3 years after Rory's death and 12 years after Candace disappeared. He was charged with 2 counts of murder and desecration of Rory's remains. Although he never admitted guilt, the evidence found in his home and his statements during interrogations confirmed his involvement in these horrific crimes. 4 of Adam's former partners testified against him, describing his cruel and violent behavior. The prosecution presented evidence that Adam had lured 2 women to his home with promises of money in exchange for intimate services that catered to his specific preferences. Once they were in his home, he would immobilize and torment them for an extended period. In the case of Rory, he likely killed her during the ordeal because he feared she would report him to the police. On September 4th, a signal from Adam's phone was detected near the city harbor, where he had discarded Rory's torso, hoping the current would carry it away. In April 2021, Adam Strong was found guilty of murdering Candace Fitzpatrick and Rory Hash, as well as desecrating Rory's remains. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Adam showed little remorse, stating that his prison cell was an improvement over his previous living conditions. 6 months after his sentencing, Adam unexpectedly revealed the location of Candace's remains. Following his directions, the police conducted a months-long search that ultimately led to the discovery of human bones. DNA testing confirmed the skeleton's identity as young Candace Fitzpatrick, and this was officially announced. Investigators now strongly suspect that there may be at least one more female victim in the Adam case. During Adam's initial interrogation, his personal belongings were seized, including a chain with 3 rings. Adam asked for the chain's return, explaining that the rings held sentimental value and he didn't want to lose them. Relatives of Rory and Candace later identified 2 of the rings as belonging to their daughters, but the origin of the 3rd ring remains unknown. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kaler family. James Craig Kaler was born in Weatherford, Texas in 1963, and his future wife, Karen Kaler, was born in the same city 2 years later. They met in the early 1980s while attending a university in Texas. At the time, Craig was a senior studying engineering, and Karen was a freshman in the humanities department. Despite their different fields of study, they quickly discovered common interests and started a romantic relationship. After graduating, they had a small, intimate wedding with close friends and family. They welcomed their first child, Emily, in 1991, followed by Lauren in 1993. The family lived in a cozy house in Weatherford and enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle, with a higher-than-average income for their area. In 1999, Craig received a lucrative job offer from a major utility company in Weatherford, which coincided with the birth of their son, Sean. Craig adored his son and, with his increased salary, purchased a spacious house in the city's most prestigious neighborhood and a family car. Karen stayed at home to care for their children, and Craig became the primary breadwinner. From the outside, their family appeared to be living a perfect life. Their 3 children have also had many successes in their fields. Emily and Lauren are talented in sports and music. Emily studies at a prestigious pharmacy college and Lauren hopes to attend a conservatory. Sean, on the other hand, showed a keen interest in mathematics and had dreams of becoming an archaeologist. The family's home life seemed idyllic, Craig providing for the family and Karen taking care of the household and raising the children. However, the family was struggling with hidden problems. In 2007, Karen confided in her sister Linda, revealing that she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown due to Craig's controlling behavior. Craig exerted total control over Karen's daily life, demanding a detailed account of every expense, no matter how small, and requiring her to report her whereabouts at all times. The family lives on a strict schedule, with Craig setting their daily routines, including bedtime, wake-up time, meal times. This rigidity makes Karen feel suffocated and trapped. Over time, Craig's need for control grew stronger. He became more demanding and selfish, scheduling Karen's every move. She felt like she had no time left for herself, there was only duty to complete. Karen tried to meet her husband's demands, hoping he would ease up and they could return to their normal life. However, Craig seemed to enjoy exerting control and refused to change. Linda was extremely worried about her sister's confide. Like everyone else, she saw Craig as the ideal husband, father, and family man, only to discover he was a controlling man. Despite this, Karen didn't want to break up her family. Additionally, she and her children relied on Craig financially. So, she decided to find a job that would give her a stable income. She joined a local gym without telling her husband, using it as an escape to clear her mind and work through her emotions. She spent several hours there every day, scheduling her time around her husband Craig's work schedule so he wouldn't notice. Not long after, the gym manager noticed her because of her attractive appearance, excellent fitness, and her hard work. Karen was given the chance to work as a fitness with the possibility of a permanent contract. This was a dream come true for her, as she could now get paid for doing something she loved. However, she was worried about how her husband, Craig, would react when he found out. When Craig found out about Karen's new job, she thought he would be angry and forbid her to continue. Surprisingly, he received this news calmly and even seemed pleased that she had found a way to make money on her own. He had a few conditions. She had to be home when he arrived, cook meals, and not let her new job interfere with their intimate life. Karen found these conditions acceptable, as she now had more freedom and independence. As Karen settled into her new job, she met a new instructor named Sunny Reese, and they quickly became friends. For Karen, who had spent years at home with little social interaction, Sunny became a trusted confidant. The 2 women spent time together at work, went for walks, had coffee, and shared heartfelt conversations. But little did Karen know, this new friendship would soon lead to unexpected romance and a complicated love triangle. It didn't take long for Karen and Sunny's friendship to evolve into a romantic relationship. At first, they kept their feelings a secret from everyone. However, after some time, Karen decided it was necessary to be honest with her husband, Craig. She spent months preparing for this conversation, searching for the right words and worrying about the potential consequences. Eventually, she confessed to Craig, Craig's reaction to his wife's revelation was surprisingly calm. However, the next day, he made an unexpected condition for accepting Karen's relationship with Sonny, which was that he wanted to be a part of it. Karen was shocked and unsure of how to respond to her husband's talk. Nevertheless, Craig took the initiative and began wooing Sonny, sending her flowers and gifts. He seemed to view this as an opportunity to revitalize his intimate life and bring new passion to his marriage. Initially, Karen and Sonny agreed to Craig's proposal. However, they soon realized that his intentions were aimed at domination. However, their unusual love triangle was short-lived. Craig demanded that Karen end the affair immediately. Despite this, Karen continued to see Sonny, as she had genuinely fallen in love. After almost 20 years of marriage, Karen seemed ready to leave her husband for someone new. This led to a series of secret actions, including moving to another state, scheduling secret meetings. In an attempt to salvage his family, Craig thought it best to relocate to another state. He started job hunting, sending out his resume, and soon secured a role as a water director for a large company in Columbia, Missouri, not far from Kansas. Craig hoped that by moving to a new state, his wife's affair with Sonny would end, and their family life would normalize. However, the summer 2008 move proved challenging for the family, as the kids had to switch schools, make new friends, and adapt to a new city. Although the family was already financially comfortable, Craig's new job nearly doubled his previous salary from Weatherford. Despite his increased responsibilities and work hours, Craig mistakenly believed he had successfully removed Sonny from his wife's life. However, Karen and Sonny continued to communicate regularly through calls, texts, and secret meetings. They would meet halfway, spend a couple of hours in a roadside hotel, and then return home. At this point, Karen realized her marriage was over. She no longer loved Craig, and it was only a matter of time before they divorced. These clandestine meetings persisted until December 2008. At the New Year's Eve celebration that year, the Kaler family went back to their hometown to reconnect with relatives and friends. Sonny was also in attendance at the gathering. Initially, Karen and Sonny kept a low profile, merely exchanging greetings. As the celebration continues and the alcohol slowly affects Karen and Sonny's behavior, they seem to have no regard for social norms. They became inseparable, openly showing affection by holding hands, sharing romantic glances. They even kissed. Craig's anger boiled over into fury after Karen publicly humiliated him by revealing her affair at a party attended by dozens of acquaintances. He lashed out at Karen and Sonny before dragging Karen away from the party. In his rage, Craig lost control and physically assaulted Karen, ripping her dress and slapping her, causing her to fall and hit her head. The incident marked the beginning of the end of their marriage. A few days later, Karen announced she was leaving Craig and initiated divorce proceedings, seeking custody of their children. Initially, Craig attempted to apologize and salvage their relationship for the sake of the children. But Karen was resolute. She said they should divorce, causing Craig to contact friends and family, begging them to convince Karen to reconsider. In the spring of 2009, Craig and Karen's marriage continued to deteriorate. Despite Craig's attempts to salvage their relationship, Karen made it clear she was leaving him for Sonny and she had never been truly happy in their marriage. The tension between them escalated into physical violence, with Craig grabbing Karen during an argument, leaving bruises on her arms. Karen reported the incident to the police, leading to Craig's arrest. After the incident, Karen took the children and moved out without waiting for the divorce to be finalized. Craig was devastated by her departure, and even more so when he discovered that his daughters, Emily and Lauren, were siding with their mother. They told him that they had never seen their mother so happy, which Craig perceived as a betrayal. As a result, he cut off contact with his daughters, only spending time with his son Sean on weekends. Despite the ongoing divorce proceedings, Craig held on to the hope that Karen would change her mind and return to him. His desire to control her led him to engage in jealous behavior, including stalking her and attempting to install a hidden camera in her home. To pursue this, Craig sacrificed his work, initially taking vacation time, then claiming illness, and eventually skipping work altogether without explanation. This reckless behavior resulted in Craig's termination from his job. Without a steady income, he was forced to move in with his parents as he could no longer afford to live on his own. With ample free time, Craig began stalking Karen, prompting her to take him to court to obtain a restraining order. In November 2009, just before Thanksgiving, Karen took her children to visit their 89-year-old grandmother, Dorothy White, in Burlingame, Kansas. On the evening of November 29th, the Burlingame police received a distress call about a suspicious van and reports of gunshots. Dorothy's neighbors reported witnessing a small truck pull up to her house. A man exit the vehicle and enter the house. They claimed to have heard screams and gunshots, but were uncertain. The man then left the house, got back into the truck, and sped away. The neighbors did not attempt to apprehend him, fearing he was armed. When police arrived, they were met by 10-year-old Sean Kaler, who was frantically calling for help. Although Sean was unable to explain what had happened, it was clear that a horrific scene awaited the police. Inside the home, near the front door, Sonny was found lying in a pool of blood but surprisingly still alive despite having 2 gunshot wounds. In the kitchen, police discovered the lifeless body of 44-year-old Karen, who had been shot in the chest and then fatally shot at close range in the head. The body of her oldest daughter, 18-year-old Emily, was found between a wall and a couch. It appeared that Emily had attempted to hide from her enraged father but was caught and killed with 2 point-blank shots. Lauren, found in a pool of blood in the second-floor bedroom, was still alive but weakly called for help and repeatedly said that her father was the one who did it. Dorothy and Lauren were rushed to a nearby hospital's intensive care unit. Despite the doctor's efforts, Lauren died on December 1st due to massive blood loss and internal organ damage. Her great-grandmother passed away a few hours later. Sean, the only surviving witness, was in shock. Psychologists worked with him, but a thorough interrogation was necessary as he was the only living witness to the tragic events at his great-grandmother's house. Sean recounted that evening, stating that his mother was in the kitchen preparing dinner when he approached her to ask for his favorite pie. Suddenly, the back door swung open, and his father entered with a shotgun, pointing it at Karen without a word. He shot her, then moved closer and fired again. Sean was initially frozen in horror. His father then turned to Sean but didn't aim the gun. Instead, Craig stared at Sean silently and intently. Sean realized he had to escape. So he jumped out the open back door. He ran towards the main entrance, hoping to alert his grandmother, sisters, and call for help. However, upon reaching the threshold, he heard several more gunshots. Fearing what he might find inside, Sean hid in a small outbuilding. He heard more gunshots and waited in terror, afraid that his father would come after him. Craig Kaler was immediately added to the wanted list, with a warning that he was armed and extremely dangerous. As police received multiple reports of a speeding truck, they were able to quickly determine the direction the gunman was heading. At one point, Craig abandoned his vehicle in a wooded area and began walking down a deserted road. Law enforcement soon caught up with him and apprehended him the next morning. Upon arrest, police found the rifle and ammunition in the back seat of the abandoned vehicle, along with prescription medication for depression and anxiety disorders near the driver's seat. Craig did not resist arrest and appeared confused and frightened. He admitted to being armed with a gun and a hunting knife, but claimed he did not intend to use them. He also acknowledged that he had done something terrible, which he believed the police already knew about. At the police station, Craig fully confessed to his crimes and opened up to the investigating officer. He shared how his wife had cheated on him with someone named Sonny and how they had humiliated him in front of friends at a New Year's Eve party. He explained how his attempts to save his marriage had cost him his job and what was left of his self-respect. Craig became emotional, stating that he didn't know how he had decided to take such drastic action and felt that everyone, including his daughters, had betrayed him. Craig's trial started in December 2010. Craig, advised by his lawyer Thomas Heaney, retracted his initial confession. He claimed his actions were due to mental illness and insanity, which was his only defense to avoid the death penalty for the murder of 4 people. Heaney argued that Craig was in a fragile mental state following a series of personal setbacks. His wife had left him for someone else, his children sided with their mother, he lost his job, and had to move back in with his parents. According to Heaney, these factors led to a breakdown, and Craig committed the crime while insane, without realizing what he was doing. However, the prosecution found no evidence of insanity or an altered mental state in Craig's actions. They argued that his actions were calculated, as he had purchased guns and ammunition in advance and went to the victim's house knowing his family was there. He shot each victim twice, ensuring no chance of survival, but intentionally spared his son Sean, allowing him to escape. In August 2011, Craig was found guilty on all counts and received a death sentence. At the final hearing, 12-year-old Sean testified, stating that he didn't want his father to die, as he was his only remaining close relative. Despite multiple appeals by Craig and his lawyers, the verdict has remained unchanged. As of today, Craig is still in prison, fighting to have the case reviewed and the death sentence overturned. After the death of his mother and sisters, Sean moved in with his grandmother. Now Sean has grown up and he has completed his studies and chosen to stay and work in his hometown.